So, yeah, there's not a whole lot going on in the news cycle, so I don't know what we're gonna really have to talk about. Maybe we could talk about some BS fireworks laws. It was funny. So here in North Carolina, it is illegal to use any fireworks that leave the ground. All right, unless you're licensed, by the state to shoot off fireworks. So where I live in North Carolina, a bunch of folks in our neighborhood pulled money together and they went down to South Carolina and they got the good stuff. Right, they got the Joe Dirt, big mortars and everything, and so those will be getting launched tomorrow night in our neighborhood, and it's good because we live in a really red county, and that some friends of ours were telling us that this was last July, a couple July 4th ago, a sheriff's deputy rolled through their neighborhood while they were launching, big old fireworks, and the deputy rolled up, and the deputy was like, "You guys, know anything that leaves the ground, not allowed in the county." They were like, "Yeah, so," and he was like, "All right, hey, just be careful. Don't blow any fingers off or anything." So it's good, and yeah, I posted earlier today on social media. It was like, hey, if you're gonna follow fireworks ordinances, laws, and restrictions where you're at tomorrow, July 4th, it's not for you. So,
yeah. Well, I think all the fireworks stands are set up here, and man, they're just packed. Fireworks stands are packed, man. It's crazy. I just don't buy fireworks anymore. I just don't. I don't consider it a waste of money, but I'm at that age. I'm pretty lucky. I tempted fate so many times in my younger years with fireworks. Still have all 10 fingers. It's like I'd rather watch them than set them off, even though they are fun. I think you said a couple years ago, the sheriff put out, "Hey, don't do this," but by the same token, I won't have my folks out giving tickets or something like that.
Yep.
That's cool. But I guarantee you, in the little, city limits, town limits I have, the cops will be out. And if you're shooting out all fireworks, they will be giving citations. I had my little NWA Ice Cube moment last night. I put it on Facebook because I was so worked up, and I was like, dude, I don't want to I don't want to have a target on my back for the Ransom Canyon police, right, on Facebook, because here's what happened. There's always people dumping dogs out here, but by the same token, dogs sometimes get out in this town. They get out, and people are like, "Hey, there's this dog over here. Who owns it?" And then somebody will get on next door Facebook. "Oh, that's my dog. I'll come get it." Right? Cool. It's all right. But somebody put out this, dog, whatever is out, and they followed up. "Hey, this is, so-and-so, contact the police because they have a chip scanner, see the dog has a chip." So the dog was chipped. The police put out, "Oh, her name is Ariel. She's a sweet girl. We contacted the owners. They will be getting a citation for animal on the loose." And it's like, okay. So I do the right thing. I get my animal chipped. So in case it gets out, it can be found. It can be returned to me. They find it, they return it to me, and then I get a ticket for it. I have to pay a ticket for animal on the loose. It's like, come on, man. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing it? If you're going to give them a site, what are you trying to warn the community? It's like, man, come on. It's 1,000 people live in this community. Stop being, man. So I took that post down, and then it was too late because it already went on. It already went on the C3 Facebook. And I wake up this morning and Roger had said, he had tagged the Ransom Canyon police. "Hey, Ransom Canyon police, anything to say about this?" And I was like doing this. If you look at YouTube, I'm like, I'm laying in bed. I was like, "Hey, can you take that down real quick?" He's like, "Why?" I was like, "Because I don't want to get a ticket. I don't want a target on my back. I know I'm being a big old female dog by doing that, but at the same time, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to rock the boat."
No, I get it, but at the same time, like that's so crappy, because you're right. Like dogs do get up, and it happens. I mean, we've had it with our dog, once, since we lived in this neighborhood. He And again, it was a picture that got thrown up on our neighborhood Facebook page, and somebody was like, "Hey, whose dog is this? Like, he's super sweet, but he won't let me get close to him. But he's just hanging, he's just hanging out and living his best life." And look on there, I was like, "Oh crap, that's Bear." I didn't realize the wind blew our gate open or however he got out. So so go down there and get him. Like, "Hey, buddy, let's go." And so he runs back home. And everything is fine. It's like never once did any of the neighbors flip out. I'm going to call the police or animal control or anything like that. And and that's the way it is for most of the dogs around here. It's it's got a collar or something. It's like, okay, well, it's somebody's dog. And our neighborhood, for the most part, you kind of know whose dog belongs to who, because folks are out walking them and you see the dog with their owner. But especially in a small community, really, dog gets out and you're first like, "Oh, a dog's so sweet. Yeah, we're really glad that, didn't get run over, didn't get hurt, didn't, there's no issues. Oh, by the way, here's your dog and your ticket." It's like, really? Back to
Yeah.
blue, huh? Okay. All right.
It makes it hard. It makes it difficult. And we had that a few episodes ago where you and I had our little back and forth about the police and all that. And I got a few people reaching out to me. It's like, "Man, Josh really hates the cops." It's like, no, he doesn't hate the cops, But these types of cases make it really difficult to get on board. It just, man, what are you doing? Be more like hey, less Barney Fife, more Andy Griffith. That's what we
Exactly.
need. Whatever. So I'm looking. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it's I don't hate the police, but there are a number of police who are making it very difficult to like the police community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I again try not to put all the cops in the same bin, but at the end of the day, they just man, they're really not helping themselves. A lot of them, especially with stuff like that. It's like, so when we lived in Maryland, one quick story, and I'll give it back to you. So we lived in Maryland. We had a cat that got out, and I wasn't sad that the cat got out because I'm pretty sure this cat was mentally disabled. Um, Dude, 9 months later, I get a knock on our door. It's animal control, and they're like, "Hey, great news! We found your cat." I was like, "Oh, like wow!" Like 9 months later, like we had written this cat off, long time ago, everything. Well, she sees our dog, right, who's in the house because she knocks on the door and our dog goes nuts barking, and she's like, "Oh, well, I looked you up on the address. You don't have a permit to have that dog from the county, so we got a citation in the mail." Like a week and a half later, and we had to go pay like a 90, because you had to register all of your pets in the county, and it's like $90 a pet. And so you're just looking at this animal control officer, you're like, really? Really? I got to register. Okay. All right. And so, again, it's just stuff like that. You're like, you want the community to like you, you want the community to accept you, and you want the community to work with you to try and make your job a little easier. No, you probably shouldn't be a raging asshole.
Well, there's multiple layers to that, because it's like, first of
Yeah,
all, that shouldn't be a thing, right? You have to register your. Come on,
exactly.
man, come on. And then we got a former animal control listener, and I'm sure he has his opinions on this, but I'm sure there are arguments about why that's important and all that stuff. I get it, but at the same time, this is where my libertarian bone comes out. It's like, I shouldn't have to register an animal with
Exactly.
the government. If it's a piranha, I get it. That's where the libertarian kind of backs off. It's like, okay, piranhas and, invasive type species, okay, maybe in that case, let's use some common sense here. And
Sure.
Roger's going to totally disagree, because he thinks that any old person should be able to fly any UAV over an airport like DFW or, SeaTac. Remember that? Remember that Roger's trying to justify flying UAV, whatever. But first of all, you shouldn't have to, report that to the government. But second of all, like a good enforcement officer, what they'd say is, hey, the county has laws, and hey, here's this, to register with the county, here you go. Here's the paperwork, and just let you off with a quote unquote warning, right? Now,
Yeah.
if something happens down the road and you were told, now let's get it straight. First of all, I don't agree with the law, but if the law is there Like Jesus said, render unto Caesar, right? Okay, all right. Now, if the cop comes back or that dog gets loose and bites somebody or whatever, now it's your ass. Okay, because
Sure.
you were warned. You were warned. You were given the information. Cool.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: did you know you had to register your dog?
We had no idea.
Unbelievable.
Because everywhere we lived, like that's never been a thing. Again, that was never a thing. And when we moved to, we PCS from Virginia to Maryland, which I mean, we drove from the south side of the Beltway, over to the north side. Like, I didn't know you had to register you had to register your dog with the county because that's never been a thing anywhere we've lived. And that was news to me. And again, it's like, okay, hey, look, and this county in Maryland, you have to register your pets, right? And I would have went all libertarian on them, and been like, well, that's crazy. Like we have to register our dogs, but you don't have to register people who come across our border illegally. Okay. um, you know, and so yeah, a warning, and then after that, sure, got it. Like, hey, mea culpa, but to straight out of the gate, it's like, oh, here's your citation. It was like, really? Okay.
And as I've had many cops say this, well, not many. I've had it said to me a couple times. Well, ignorance of the law is no excuse, and that's when I go back to all of us, every single person. And we've said this before, and I truly do believe it. And because we are going to talk about Trump tonight, by the way, obviously. But I'm really not, and that's why Josh and I, Roger, are all on the same page with counterintelligence not having a law enforcement hat along with that. Because if you investigate someone long enough with intrusive enough means, you're going to find all kinds of laws they broke, whether that's city, county, state, federal. There are so many laws out there that we're subject to. At any given time, you're breaking one, whether you know it or not. And whatever. Not a big fan. But let me show you. Let me share this. So I just kind of scrolling through X here, and there's a leaked video of Trump, and I believe this was taken today or yesterday. And he's playing golf. He's putting on his golf. He's in the golf cart. He's putting on his glove, and I haven't listened to it yet. But he's quoted, "Quitting the race. I got him out. He's an old, broken down pile of crap. Now we have Kabbalah. She's so effing bad." It's he's sitting here saying this. Somebody, recorded him. I don't know how, but yeah, people have been hitting me up. It's like, when are y'all going to record again? When are y'all going to record and talk about the debate? And maybe we should just start at the beginning. I was with some buddies doing some work in San Antonio, and we were all staying in the same hotel. We kind of sequestered a TV in the lobby area, or like the lounge area, because we're high class, we're snooty. We have access to the lounge, and got some pizza, got some beer, and sat down and turned the TV up and watched the debate. And without going into too much, because we could bounce back and forth on our take on the debate itself, first 2 minutes, Josh, I was like, oh no, this is going to be a long 90 minutes. That is the first 2 minutes. I was like, oh man, this is going to be really way worse than I thought. And yeah, we can go into it, but man, I mean, since then, I think I messaged you guys the next day or maybe the day after that on Saturday. And I was like, it just seems surreal. Like what happened on Thursday night just seems surreal. Seems like it didn't even happen. Just disastrous. What was your take on it? Like your initial take, like, what'd you think?
So first of all, thanks to everybody who joined our Slack channel, to kind of live chat through that debate. As soon as he walked out there, I was like, uh-oh. Because when he walked out on the stage and walked up to his podium, it was very robotic. You could tell just from the look on his face that he was not okay. I expected, honestly, and that was not what I expected. I expected him to come out, State of the Union, just juiced to the gills, like he had just pounded, 5 Red Bulls and 18 Monsters, 30 minutes prior, and him to go on a tear. And that was obviously not what we got. What we got was, a man who could not string together a coherent sentence. He started off slow, and I don't know if they gave him his cocktail, a cocktail of drugs late because he started off. It was terrible, dude. Like you said, the first couple of minutes was like, ooh. He could barely get through his opening statement, and his opening statement was terrible. His opening statement was like a first-time student taking a public communications class. They're like, oh, I have a story to tell, and he just rapid fire. Let me get these talking points out, but he was still stammering over himself. Everybody's seen it. I don't, do a play-by-play on it. But within the like you said, as soon as he walked out, I was like, ooh, like he does not look okay. He's very robotic in his movements. And then through the first couple of minutes, I was like, man, I think Joe's going to be in for a long night. And we were correct. It was the worst debate I've seen in my lifetime. By far. I mean, it was 100 times worse than Obama's first debate with Mitt Romney. But I mean, that wasn't even close. And they can make every excuse they want for him. And KJP came out today. First it was like, well, he had a cold. Then it was he's jet lagged, right? And everything is like, okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Joe Biden has been in elected office since 1973. I was born in 1977. Okay. So you got a guy who's been in elected office since 1973. He spent 8 years as the vice president, and he spent 4 years as the president. And he came out and laid down the absolute worst debate performance in modern history. It wasn't because he had a cold, and it wasn't because he was jet lagged. It was because Joe has cognitive issues. And we've talked about this. We talked about this at the election, in 2020. Joe has cognitive issues. And they really started driving that cold thing. And KJP even brought it up today. And it was like, okay, so if he had a cold and he was suffering that bad, why did he go to Waffle House afterwards and shake a bunch of people's hands and be in a small space? Waffle Houses aren't that big for anybody who's been in there. I know a couple people who they don't listen anyway. They think Waffle House is, where people who are white trash eat. But hey, if he was sick and he's that concerned, COVID and all that stuff, why did he go to Waffle House? And bro, you ain't jet lagged from your international trip because you got back to the United States on June 15th. That debate was on June 27th. You ain't still jet lagged. I promise you that, especially not coming east to west. Get out of here with that crap. Like that's just nonsense. But there was some, I'll kick it back over to you. You want to talk about the rest of the debate. There was a couple of highlights during the debate. That I think are worth mentioning. But yeah, dude, that debate, man, that thing was terrible.
Well, I was so shocked by it that, I thought there'd be more commercial breaks. And hey, I never thought I'd say this, but, props to CNN. I mean, they did not go light. They didn't do any of the hijinks I thought they'd do. They did kind of save him a couple times by cutting in because I was timing it. I was timing the response. They'd cut in and say, thank you. That was his signal to, hey, stop talking. Thank you. So, but that wasn't too bad. The questions were relatively hard hitting. They treated Trump, I thought, the same way. They treated Biden the same way they treated Trump. Well, hey, Mr. President, or whatever, you really didn't answer the question. The question was, you have X amount of seconds left. So I was shocked. I was just so shocked with that, but I was like, because we had talked about it beforehand and we had our preconceived notions. You mentioned it. It's like we thought he was going to be drugged to the gills, and we were waiting for like the 60-minute mark for him to start falling apart. Didn't happen that way, as we said. So that was shocking. So I start thinking, when they finally took the first commercial break, because man, I was drinking that beer and I was, my bladder was filling up. I was like, when are they going to take a break? I don't want to miss this. They finally took one. I went to the restroom, and it so happened my stepson and his girlfriend were there at the hotel watching it with us. And I stopped at him and he's like, what's going on here? And I was like, I think they set him up. They did this on purpose. They didn't give him all the drugs they were supposed to. Because I thought that. I was like, man, certainly, because like the State of the Union, the very next day when he did that rally, wherever that was, he looked like a totally different person. But after having thought about it, I'm thinking, no, he's just sundowning, man. That's what it is. It doesn't matter how much they drug him up. He's sundowning. And, Trump, I was impressed not by Trump's answers necessarily, because I think he kind of got sidetracked, especially toward the end. It's like, come on, just get away from that nonsense you're saying. But he was so disciplined. Other than that, he was so disciplined. He listened to whoever was coaching him and just said, let that dude talk. Let that dude talk. Throw out that zinger. When it happens, have this zinger in your mind of, I really don't understand what he said at the end there, and I don't think he does either. Boom, zinger, done.
That was so
I don't even remember what he was talking about. It's like, oh, that looks bad. So and I started thinking about this during the debate. This is not going to be, it doesn't matter how well Trump does. It doesn't matter. The story is going to be about Joe and what a disastrous train wreck that was. And, it's just been getting worse since the debate. Their damage control, I think there's a lot of confusion, and we can unpack that. But you already started with the cold and the jet lag, but there's been even more that's come out where they're trying to do damage control, but the damage control makes it look worse than that, than if they would have said nothing at all. And yeah, they are in such disarray right now. It's been glorious to watch. And I think I said this to y'all that night, and we were all agreeing. It's like, this is pivotal, man. This is pivotal. Like, this is historical pivotal. And I think we were right in saying that because, man, there's some stuff going on. Man, you and I were talking about it last night. There's stuff going on right now that our country's really never seen, and let's just leave the Supreme Court decisions, let's leave that for later. But man, they're in a real pickle right now. And it started with that debate. And I'll say this, and I'll kick it to you, because this is what we really want to say, is this is not even like the Emperor's New Clothes thing. It's everyone was exposed that night. Like, everyone who knew what was going on, who don't believe your lying eyes kind of thing. It's like, man, to me, this has been so obvious, and it's gotten really obvious the past 6 months. When we first started this podcast talking about Biden and all this stuff, we were saying he's not all there. But man, even back then, 3.5 years ago, it wasn't this bad. And it's like, the cheap fakes and all that, where he's in Normandy and he turns and walks off. And they were like, oh, no, he was going to talk to that paratrooper. It's like, okay, I'll give you that. He's going to talk to a paratrooper. He didn't just wander off, but it's like, he was still lost. We all saw the same thing. Why is he going to talk to a paratrooper? Like stumbling over there like he's walking on toothpicks. It's like, it doesn't matter. Can you people not see this? It's so obvious. And it's just like, it shouldn't have. Josh, here's the thing. It shouldn't have been a surprise to us. We should have just gone ahead and predicted, dude, it's not going to matter how many drugs they pump into him. It's just not good. So I guess, I don't know. I'll kick it back to you for more thoughts on the debate and stuff. But question I'll just throw out there. Where do they go from here? Like, if he stays in, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but if he stays in, where do they go from here? Do they do another debate? Do they put him in the basement? Man, it's just, they're in a bad spot.
They're in a very bad spot. So I'm going to put a pin in your question. Where do they go from here? And remind me and make sure I answer that. The debate, there's a couple points I just want to point out. Obviously, Biden's cognitive state. All right. That is not, that's not, like you said, anybody who's, watched him, that should not have been a surprise. But a lot of people got, like you said, a lot of people got exposed because the mainstream media, his aides, everybody in the party has been covering for him for a very long time. All right. And they covered for him when he was vice president, because even when he was vice president, there was times that he would get in front of a camera and, you see Barack just kind of like roll his eyes and take a deep breath, like, oh God, what's Joe going to say? But you're right. I think in the last 24 months, it's gotten a lot worse, especially in the last 12. And I think some people were genuinely surprised because of how he was at the State of the Union, right? The State of the Union was what, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And he came out and at the State of the Union, I mean, he was, that dude was fired up, you know, but again, get back to your point about, what did they not, did they set him up? But you're right. Donald Trump does not often surprise me. Right. And it's just because, when Trump gets in front of a microphone, you're like, or when a microphone gets shoved anywhere near him, you're like, this dude's going to bulldoze people out of the way to get in front of that microphone. And he's going to start freestyling. And there's no telling what he's going to say. And whatever he says should not be a surprise. But him being quiet and being as reserved as he was, I was shocked. That dude was disciplined. That guy was absolutely 100% disciplined, and I was beside myself. I was like, I can't believe it. I would have never guessed. He didn't any he reserved. He didn't, there's very few, really no personal attacks on Joe, by and large. I mean, yeah, it's like I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he knows what he said either. That was brilliant. It was perfectly timed. The cadence, it was perfectly delivered. Um and like you said, he trailed off there toward the end on his, on some of the questions when they asked him. He started ranting a little bit, and it was like, okay, man, get back on message, get back on track. I don't think Trump hit it out of the park in the debate. He didn't have to, because all he needed to do, again, he's like it's like a gorilla in a guerrilla war. It's like, you don't have to win, man. You just can't lose. And all he needed to do was just be quiet, let that dude talk. And I think it was perfect. Um, you know, it's Biden did not help himself in the debate with, obviously his performance, and then even his attacks on Trump. A lot of them were one-liners, rehearsed. Well, he's a convicted felon. It's like, okay, dude. I mean, come on. They keep bringing that up, but I think a lot of people, and this is anecdotal, uh, some of the people that I've talked to who hate Trump, like despise Trump, and did not vote for him in 2016. They didn't vote for him in 2020. They're not going to vote for him in 2024. They have mentioned, they're like, yeah, that whole case in New York, that was kind of BS. That dude was, like you said, show me the person and I'll find a crime. And for them to keep going back to that, well, he's a convicted felon. He's a convicted felon. It's like, you're really not helping yourself with that, because most people know that it was BS. Not to mention now that you have Hunter as, an advisor to Joe Biden, who is sitting in the Oval Office in meetings. It's like, okay, so Donald Trump's a convicted felon. Well, now your closest advisor and, quote, the smartest guy I know, according to Joe Biden, is also a convicted felon and a meth addict. So I went that whole convicted felon thing doesn't carry a whole lot of weight. I thought Trump's answer on January 6th was perfect. Right? He did not take the bait. Joe tried to bait him with it, and Trump's like, well, on January 6th, inflation was this. On January 6th, this was the cost of whatever. Maybe the cost now. Right? I think that was perfect. And then I think Trump did himself a favor by coming out and saying, yeah, no, I would not sign a national abortion ban. Yeah, you want a morning after pill? That's fine. I don't care. Yeah, I wouldn't ban that. I think that was perfect. Again, Trump didn't knock it out of the park, but I think he performed when he needed to. And I think he came out and he said he said the right things, and he left the personal attacks out of it on Joe. Me personally, I think it would have been a perfect time when, Biden brought up the very fine people thing. It's like, hey, yeah, no, man. I mean, even Snopes, who's very left, left leaning, left skewed, even they debunked that. But one thing that one thing that they actually confirmed, and so did the FBI, was that your daughter's diary is true. So, you can say I said very fine people, but I didn't shower with my daughter like you did. And but he didn't say away for that. Maybe Trump's a bigger man than me. I don't know. But I would I would have absolutely thrown that out there. You want to attack me on some stupid stuff like that? I would be like, dude, I'll hook you up. So where do the Democrats go from here?
Let's table that. Let's table that.
Okay.
Because there's still stuff to talk about, right? there's still stuff to talk about that's happened between, as a week ago tomorrow. It seems like it's been longer than that, right? It's a week ago tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So let's talk about the aftermath of the debate for a little bit. Immediately after the debate, I was switching between all the networks. I went up to the room, and my wife was just like, dude, go to bed. And I was like, I can't go to bed. How come you're not excited about this? This is crazy. And because it's historic. I mean, it doesn't seem historic now, but it will be. I mean, before I think the biggest quote flub in a debate was probably, Nixon and Kennedy, where, it was a televised debate, and Nixon refused to make up. Geez. Oh, how about that? How about Joe, man? He looked so pale. He looked awful. And then he comes out and gives his little SCOTUS 4-minute speech, and he's got bronzer on. It's like, oh my God.
He looked orange.
He did. And I lost my train of thought there. But so either way, right after the debate, Joe Scarborough comes out, and who had just said a month ago, this is the best Biden I've ever seen. I've been covering politics, all this. And then he comes out right after. He's like, this guy's got to go. I mean, complete 180. All the newsrooms, X was on fire, just like, this is a disaster, all the talking heads. So they got that out of their system. And I think Nancy Pelosi, no. I can't remember what Pelosi, that was this week, where she's like, maybe we do need a cognitive test on him. But everyone's throwing it back to Trump. It's like, oh, he needs cognitive tests too, whatever. That was a little later. But the immediate aftermath that weekend was just complete panic, sheer panic. And then my take was, early in the week, the panic was starting to subside, and you could see a little bit of the circling of the wagons on Monday, right? And then on Tuesday, was it Clyburn that came out? And he was saying, well, if they replace him, it's going to have to be with Kamala. And then, so they started talking about replacing him. And now it seems to me, Josh, that there's a kind of a break in the party a little bit between those who are going to say, no, he's good to go, and those who are just like stepping out. Because tonight he had a conference with the governors, right? A bunch of governors came to the White House. And just before we started recording, 3 governors came out after that meeting, just 3, and gave a statement to the press of, Joe Biden, he's good. You may, he had a bad night the other night, but all I know is under Trump, there was chaos, and under Joe Biden, there wasn't. It's what you'd expect from Democrat governors. And the 3 governors, I'm not going to be able to remember, is Kathy Hochul, New York, is the Minnesota governor, and then what's his name from Maryland, right? They came out and did their thing. My question is this: it's like, why are you sending those 3 out? Hochul, I get, kind of, but the other 2, where's Gavin Newsom? Where's Gretchen Whitmer? Where are the ones that like could actually replace you? How come they didn't get trotted out? Probably because they didn't want to be trotted out. They don't want to be seen as supporting this show, this poop show. I don't know. That's kind of my take. It's only been a week, but there's been just a lot of movement. A lot of people like can't quite figure out what to do, and it's just chaos. It's chaos. So what was your take? You think I'm kind of on the button or a little off?
No, I think you're square on the button. Because I didn't turn the TV off after the debate either. And usually after the debate, we'll watch, because each party has their rep that comes out and, has their talking points, and they ramble through it. But when that debate ended, all it was, it was Joy Reid and Van Jones and everybody sitting there at the desk at CNN, and they started talking about how bad Joe Biden was. They're like, this, we can't continue. And Van Jones looked like he was going to cry. Van Jones was, he was like, I admire Joe Biden. I appreciate what he's done, but we could not continue with Joe Biden. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, wow, holy smokes. Because these are the same people who have been covering for Joe Biden for years. They have been, dude, they have been running interference for Joe Biden for years. And for a lot of the, the big CNN pundits, um, you know, to come out and, throw Joe Biden under the bus like that, that was massive. Absolutely massive. And then, yeah, that started permeating. I mean, other people, on X mostly, a lot of the talking heads, man, they came out and they were like, yeah, we have to take a different direction. Uh, and I didn't turn the TV off probably for about an hour, watch that. And it was, it was glorious watching people on CNN, basically have a meltdown not over Trump, right? Over their own candidate that, they've spent covering for years. And Joe Scarborough, he was like, he made the comment, he was like, this, like you said, the best Biden I've ever seen, sharp as a tack. And just 2 weeks prior, the media started that deep fake, right? About Joe at like Normandy when he got out of the Suburban and he's looking around, his mouth is hanging open, he's all slack jawed, and he's looking around, and it's not like, okay, well, Joe, missed his cue or whatever. It's like that dude's legit confused on where he's at. Not, hey, I don't know what direction to. I don't know if I turn left or right when I get out of the beast, but like I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know where I'm at right now. And that's how he looked during the debate. When Trump was talking, they pan over to Joe and he's standing there with his mouth open like he's catching flies and he's not necessarily all the time looking at Trump, like he is staring off into the abyss. And it was just, you look at him and you're like, bro, nobody's home.
Dude,
Nobody is home.
I was confused, and the two Chris's who occasionally listen, they might listen to this one, they had to set me straight. Because I was like, they were like, I was like, he's looking at Trump. They got the frames backward. And they were like, oh no, they
Nope.
don't. He is staring off into space. I was like, oh my God. I was sitting there trying to give Biden the benefit of the doubt because I was like, there's no way this can be this bad. And I'm like, no, bro, it is. I was like, oh my God, this is so awful.
Nah, man, he is checked. He was checked out. Like checked out. And dude, that's all the signs of dementia. That is all the signs of dementia. And it's just, sundowning and everything. And then somebody, I forget who it was. It might have been, I don't think it was the White House, but it was like, maybe it was the White House came out and was like, well, the president's really on it between the hours of 11 to 4, and, stuff like that. And it was like, oh, so so after 4 o'clock, he starts going down in cognitive ability. It's like, I wonder if there could be a symptom for that. Right. I wonder if there's a disease that, you could say, hey, this is a really big symptom of. And they were like, oh, well, he's always, he's fatigued and he doesn't do well in the evenings. It was like, yeah, most people with dementia don't. It's called sundowning, like you said. It's like the guy is sundowning. That's what's happening. Um, so when you turn around and then it picked up steam the next day, it was all over the media, right? All over the media. Nobody could ignore it anymore. And I think a large part of the media, they weren't upset because Joe turned in such a bad performance. They weren't upset. They weren't caught by surprise on Joe's poor performance. It was they were mad they got caught because there's a lot of people who run cover for him for a very long time who just got exposed as liars. Because 2 weeks ago they were like, "This guy." Those are all deep fake videos of him, looking lost and not being, commenting on his cognitive ability. I mean, there were people who, I mean, they were threatening, damn near legal action against people who were commenting on Joe's cognitive ability. And then this guy turns up and turns in, that debate performance, and everybody, the cover of Time with Joe walking off, off the cover, and they're saying it's time for change. That right there, it was like that dude's done. Like there's a massive movement to move Joe along. Um and but again, so talking about like what do they do? What do they do about that? for Luke. So I'll ask you, and turn it back over to you since I've been rambling for a minute. Is if they replace Joe, I'm not 100% convinced they will, because right now, especially with the money, the campaign contributions, the delegates that have already, committed themselves to him, the DNC rules, all the state laws on, replacing a candidate post primary. Do they replace them? Can they replace them? And if they do, who are they replacing them with?
Yeah, it's a big question. So the way I understand it, there's a lot has to do with the committed delegates, right? And the way I understand it with the committed delegates and the money, is that Joe would have to drop out. He'd have to in order to use that war chest that they've got, he would have to drop out first. Next thing is, and I don't know the legalities of all this, but if Kamala stays in, I think the working assumption is they'll still be able to use that money. Okay. So that's a big thing. Money is huge. Delegates are huge too. And we're coming up on a deadline where the ballots can't be changed because there's just not enough time to get them all out there. And I think there could be some hanky-panky with that going down the road. But so I'm with you. I'm not completely convinced he's going to drop out, but it's hard to believe anything coming out because today I'm sure people watching the news and Joe told a group of whatever, he said, we're staying in. And I think that was widely circulated. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep doing this. I honestly think that's okay with Kamala Harris because, dude, he's not going to make it 4 years. He's not. I mean, they'll do something, and then she'll be president, and then she doesn't have to run, right? If he won, but it's sheer panic. I don't know if they replace him with anybody. It's going to have to be with Kamala Harris. It's going to have to be. Who does she pick as her VP? I don't know. Doesn't really matter, really. I guess could be Gavin Newsom, but I don't know. I think it's a coin flip on whether he's replaced or not. I think it's possible that they could bribe him into dropping out. That could be relatively easy to do. Joe, we're going to give you a golden parachute. We're going to set up this 501c3. We're going to have all this money go into it. It's going to be a presidential library, and your feet will never touch the ground, and neither will your families. You're going to be, you're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars for the rest of your life. You solidified your legacy. You're dropping out for the greater good. We'll do that at the convention, and we'll just hand it off to Kamala. I think that is possible, that they could do that. But that's going to happen soon, man, like within the next 2 weeks. So 3 weeks is pushing it. If he hasn't dropped out by August, he's running. That's it. He's got a month. I think it could happen. I think it could happen this week. It's either going to happen this week or just before or during the convention. But who do they replace him with? It's going to have to be Kamala. Now, the smart thing to do for the Democrat Party would just be cut your losses. It's like run him anyway. Run him anyway, or get Kamala to run. We're going to cut our losses because she's not going to win either. She's very unlikable, almost as unlikable as Hillary Clinton. Almost.
Agreed.
So I think that's a cakewalk. It'll kind of close, but not really. It'll be similar to the Hillary Clinton. I think if Biden continues to run, it's not going to be Reagan-esque, but it's going to be bad, dude. I think it's going to be so bad that it won't even matter what hijinks they do. It'll be a landslide, and there are not enough hijinks in this world without COVID to push Joe over the line. I don't think that's going to happen. So the smart thing to do, back to the smart thing, and see if you agree with me on this. Strategic thinkers like Axelrod, for instance. Axelrod's a smart dude. It's like, hey, let's get everybody in a room and just be like, look, let's go with what we got, whether that's Biden or Harris. And let's start looking at the next 20 years because they got themselves into this situation. They say politics is all about timing. When you run is all about timing. And man, they screwed this up for the long term by running Joe Biden, basically. Yep. Because I still say it wouldn't have mattered who they ran against Trump. It probably would have been a similar outcome. So they screwed up. They got themselves into this situation. There's no getting out of it at this point that I know of. I don't think Michelle Obama is going to run. I don't think she's going to run. So let's start planning. Let's get our horses in line that are going to carry us through the next 4 election cycles or 5. Let's start marshaling our resources. Let's start thinking about 4 years with Trump, how we're gonna work with that, how we're gonna do the midterms, halfway through his presidency, and let's start planning. Let's get Newsom on board. Let's get Whitmer on board. Let's dig out Amy Klobuchar, and let's start building our bench. Right? Let's start planning for that. Because it's too late. Y'all screwed up, and let's not put ourselves in a position like that again. That's what they should be doing, man. That's what they should be doing. Whether they do that or not, I think that would be the smart way to go. If I'm a Democrat, like high level, whatever, that's what I'd be saying. It's like, look, man, we dug ourselves this hole. Let's make sure we don't get into a hole like this for another 20 years. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. I would be very surprised if it's someone other than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris on the ballot in November.
Yeah, no, that answered the question, and I agree. I mean, and again, I hate to go back to, we told you so, but when we talked about this in 2020, when we talked about Biden's cognitive issues, and we said, hey, they have a Kamala Harris problem because you can't get rid of Joe Biden and replace him with a white dude, right? You have to. Kamala's the next one up, and Kamala has not done herself any favors over the last 3.5 years. She's a complete clown. Everybody recognizes that she is just a DEI hire. She is zero value added. She's unlikable. It's just not just she's you take a look at her. It's like, all right, well, Obama was unlikable, Hillary was unlikable, but at least I'll give I'll give Obama and Hillary, they were eloquent, they could speak. You get Kamala in front of a microphone, and she's absolutely terrible. She can't speak coherently. She can't put coherent thoughts together. She starts that cackle when she gets nervous. That's her tick. And she's just all around unlikable. Could you imagine, like, the sound, if she is going to be the nominee and they do, put her in the driver's seat, dude, the campaign season is going to be off the chain. The sound bites coming out of that are going to be pure gold, absolute pure gold. But I'm with you. If I'm Chuck, if I'm the Chuck Schumers of the party, if I'm the Pelosi's of the party, it's, hey, check it out. Let's just go ahead. 2024 is a wrap. We're going to keep Joe. We're going to run Joe. We'll try and push him across the finish line as much as we can, but it's going to be what it's going to be. But the focus should be on the Democrats. Okay, we're going to try and we're going to try and control one of the chambers. Okay, so that's why, hey, you're a lame duck. For the first 2 years, we'll push, full court press to, keep one or both of the chambers for the midterms. And that way we can at least lame duck, the president for 4 years. And, we'll put Gavin Newsom or whoever up in 2028. I think that's their best play, because if they put Kamala Harris in a driver's seat this year, I don't know that she wins. And it's not going to be people are going to go to the polls and vote for Trump. It's going to be people just stay home, which ultimately helps Trump. People stay home, it helps Trump. But they like you said, they did it to themselves because they picked a completely unqualified candidate to be vice president. If they would have picked a Gavin Newsom to be vice president, or if they would have picked even a Whitmer, or like you said, a Klobuchar to be vice president, they'd be in a Joe would have been out on Saturday. But we wouldn't even have
Hakeem Jeffries. Even Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah.
Why did it have to be a woman? It didn't have to be.
Oh, well, no, it had to be, because it had to be a female of color, because that's what the Bolsheviks demanded at the time. And yeah, dude, if it would have been one of those four, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because they would have tossed Joe out an hour after the debate. They would have been like, "That guy's done. Here's our candidate." Yeah, it wouldn't even been a question. Um, you know, I don't know that they force him. I don't know that they're going to be able to force him out though. He's come out and granted, I mean, what they say is what they say, but Joe's family, Jill Biden, is probably one of the most evil people on earth because she is keeping Joe in this, knowing that the state that he's in, and as his wife, that is unforgivable. The other thing, Hunter Biden, when they went to Camp David this past weekend and they had that big family discussion on whether Joe stays in or not, and they were like, one of the loudest voices in the room to him to stay in was Hunter. Well, of course, because Hunter's going to need a pardon. Hunter's going to need a pardon after the tax trial because they're going to find him guilty on tax evasion. I almost bet because, again, like you said, dude, you could go through any U.S. citizen's taxes and you can find something wrong with them. You can find something wrong. They shorted the government $1. There you go. Boom. We got them. All right. That's how they got Al Capone. That's how they got a lot of people. So Hunter Biden needs that pardon. So Hunter's going to be a very loud voice. And that's why Hunter has now joined Joe in the Oval Office as one of his top advisors, because Hunter supposedly stated, quote unquote, "I do not trust my father's aides." And I don't know that the family is going to allow Joe to drop out. And like you said, if he doesn't voluntarily drop out, he's got the delegates and he's got the money, and he controls it. So I don't know that I don't think they have a choice. But throw it back over to you. But I have not seen the left, as a whole. I have not seen them this broken and this lashing out like they are, because this is just the debate. We even talked about the 3 Supreme Court cases that came down this past week. That just, I mean, these people are broken. And, as far as, the article today, I think it was from the New York Times. They came out and they were like, well, it wasn't the New York Times. I think it was MSNBC. They're like, well, Donald Trump hasn't named a vice president yet. And you're like, so really? You might want to talk about the president, the current president, before you talk about a vice presidential nominee for the guy who's not president. That seems to be a more pressing issue. But even that, and Trump, I think Trump's playing it perfect. Trump's just being quiet. He's like, yeah, yep, sounds good. Yeah, I haven't named one yet. And he is letting them melt down. And they are straight in Chernobyl mode right now. They are so broken.
He's absolutely doing the VP pick on purpose. He's for probably a number of reasons, right? He wants to see how this is going to shake out, right? Because if it's him on the stage debating Kamala, like, okay, who's going to be her VP pick, But if it is going to be Kamala running, let's pick the person who can just take her apart like nobody's business. I think that's calculated on his part, and I think he's got a fairly deep bench to pick from. I don't think it should be Tim Scott. I don't think that. I like Tim Scott. I think he's a great guy. Have him over for dinner. Have a great time. I'd trust him to babysit. My kids don't need babysitting, but grandkids, of course, the dogs start freaking out. But so, yeah, one thing I typed in the chat there, what I thought was interesting in the immediate aftermath of the debate was, Laura Trump, who heads the RNC now, appeared on Hannity, and right next to her was JD Vance. I was like, well, this is interesting. This is very interesting that Laura Trump has JD Vance at her side, doing the commentary right after the debate with Hannity. And then after that, Marco Rubio comes on immediately after Laura Trump and JD Vance, and he looked like he had just gotten gut punched. Like he just looked like it's like it. And maybe I was reading too much into it, confirmation bias or whatever. I was just like, oh, Rubio knows too. He thinks he should be sitting there next to Laura Trump.
Yep.
Who knows? It could be JD Vance. Honestly, Josh, and you may disagree with me on this, I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy is a bad choice for VP. I really don't. I think he'd be better in the cabinet somewhere, if you're serving the nation, but I don't think he'd be a bad choice for VP. But either way, we're getting kind of far. So if you truly do care what's best for this country, you don't want Biden running. not even if you hate because you are taking a chance that he's going to win. And like you posted on X today, I think it was you. It's like, if this guy is not, he doesn't need to be carrying the codes, the nuclear codes. And I hate to be like all cliche like that, because there are a lot of checks and there are a lot of fail safes on who pushes the button. But again, if the dude is only functional from 10 to 4, you're going to get that 3 a.m. phone call, and he's obviously not able to even respond. At least Kamala Harris you'd be able to get her out of bed. Maybe. I mean, I'm sure she might make the wrong decision, whatever, but at least she'd be able to respond to the check. I mean, I don't know. This is a scary time. It really is a scary time. Man, that guy's just not fit, and they're going to put him up there, and there's always a chance he could win. There's always a chance.
Sure.
Who knows? There could be, pictures come out of Trump playing poker with Satan, and lose the evangelical vote or something. It's just, yeah. The thing that freaked me out, I know I'm going far afield here, is the 10 to 4 thing. Oh, he's great from 10 to 4. That's 6 hours. That's 6 hours. The average American sees that if they pay attention to the news. They're like, 10 to 4. I have a job. I work 8 hours a day minimum. And you are only functional from 10 to 4. That's not good. And then when they started talking about his debate prep, where it leaked out that he didn't even start prep until 11 in the morning, and then he'd have to take a nap at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We all know that he's only good till 4. It's like you're talking tops to maybe 3.5, 4 hours of debate prep. Yeah. It's like, man, you are not.
And on that, when is he getting the daily intelligence brief? When is he getting all those other presidents? Like, because there's other presidential duties that still have to happen, even though you're prepping for a debate guy.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating what's going on right now. I love it. I wish this was my job, just to watch this stuff all day and come up with hot takes and things. Wish I got paid to do it, because it's so much fun, and I don't know. It's just an interesting time, we'll see. And like you said, I'll say it one more time. I think Trump's playing it just right now. But of course, I'm not on Truth Social. I don't know what he's putting out there, but yeah, I don't know a better way he could be handling it. I don't know what his fundraising looks like exactly, but it can't be bad. There are donors asking for their money back for getting Joe Biden money. That's just real bad, man. And the freak out. So I want to bring this up, and then we'll maybe move on to the Supreme Court decisions. I was talking to my friend Jesse. Again, he's an occasional listener, but he goes, "Oh, you can pass this off as your own idea." And what he was saying to me, I was like, I don't necessarily think his idea is original, because I completely agreed with him, and my mind was going this way anyway. I said earlier that I think if Biden runs, I think it's going to be a landslide. I really do. Not a Reagan-esque landslide, but I don't think they'll be able to question it. If it was close, people on both sides are going to freak out. If Joe Biden, after that debate performance, if the election was next week and he won, people on the right are going to lose their minds, right? And if it's close and Trump wins, people on the left are going to lose their minds. If it's a blowout after that debate performance, Jesse and I would call it, my view is maybe the response will be more muted from the left, like from the crazies on the left, right? In other words, Jesse thinks that it's less likely that someone's going to die in the aftermath because of riots and all these things. What do you think about that? I'm going to go let those damn dogs out.
Possibly. I think if it would have just been the debate at hand, then possibly it'd be like, oh man, yeah, like we get it. I think. You're always going to have some both on both ends of the far ends of both sides of the spectrum that aren't going to accept it regardless. but once you layer on the 3 Supreme Court cases, I don't think I think a Trump win, is they're going to lose their minds anyway. Um, Simply because of, when you look at, social media the last couple of days, you look at the news the last couple of days, like these people are not okay. The left, people on the left are not okay. And in 2016, they lost their minds, and we all laughed. Especially the people at the Hillary Clinton campaign headquarters. Getting ready to celebrate. Because I'm with her. And then Trump wins the election, and they're crying and melting down, and it was glorious, and we're all laughing. And then the summer of love in 2020. You saw the left come unhinged. I think if you see a Trump win this November, I think we're going to relive the summer of 2020 because of one, it's Donald Trump. All right. But these 3 Supreme Court cases, I don't know how busy the Secret Service is or the FBI is this week, but the amount of people who advocated for the president, the sitting president, to assassinate not only Trump, but assassinate Supreme Court justices, assassinate, Americans, the right in general, people on the right in general, was astonishing. And they weren't shy about it. They were like, this should happen right now. And you're like, you, and people are snitch tagging, the Secret Service and the FBI, US Marshals everywhere. I think I even did on somebody's post, right? Because it was like, this is unhinged. Right? It's one thing to get on there and talk about, oh well, Clarence Thomas is corrupt, or Roberts is a rhino, or Sotomayor writes her her opinions like a teenager. It's one thing to get on there and do all that, but these people, I mean, they were openly calling for the assassination and the kidnapping, of Supreme Court justices, former president, Trump. Like it was, you're like, holy cow! Like this is absolutely crazy. Dude, and we talked about it the other day. It's like, man, it's just it feels different. It feels different. And you brought up the point. AOC is coming back in, and she's like, we're filing articles of impeachment against the Supreme Court. And it's like, okay, well, good luck. It's not going to you're not going to get that in the House because one, you don't control the majority, and two, nobody. I don't think anybody's there yet. In mass enough to say, okay, we're going to start impeaching, and removing Supreme Court justices, or we're going to start expanding the court. Because I still think you have enough. I still think you have enough folks in the House and the Senate that are like, yeah, man, we're not going to play that game expanding the Supreme Court because that's going to lead nowhere good. I think Harry Reid's nuclear option is still, well enough in memory that are like, yeah, that didn't work out well for us. So we probably shouldn't go start expanding the court either. Because at the end of the day, you're not always going to control the White House and the Senate. But talking about the left being unhinged, man, I just, if this time it feels different. And I think if Trump wins in November, we're going to see a winter of love. It ain't gonna be a winter of death. It's gonna be a winter of love, and it's gonna look a lot like the summer of 2020 across the United States, by and large. So, if you want to highlight the Supreme Court cases that came out this week, that man, it was just not a good week to be a Democrat.
Yeah, they're like you said, they're unhinged. I mean, the immunity thing is what really set people over the edge. I think it broke Joy Reid. I mean,
yeah,
I think somebody was saying to me, it's probably you, she is whatever. I disagree with almost everything that comes out of her mouth, but she is articulate. I understand her misguided points. I understand the faulty logic that got her there, but man, she came out and just like it broke her, talking about we got a king now, all this stuff. And they tipped their hand because oh, we've made it a king now. Now Trump is going to start drone. It's like, oh, so you've already given Trump the win. That it's like, wow. And then the reactionaries, oh well, send SEAL Team 6 in there. And it's like, man, why? Now I'm talking about SEAL Team 6, so Darren's getting a little blood flow in his nether regions right now. But I mean, there are, with the immunity case, I mean, we can deconstruct it if you want, but it's really it was kind of an inconsequential decision. For those of you aren't following this real close, I mean, it basically just lined out what the president is, when the president is immune and when the president is not. And this is not just Donald Trump, it's every president in the past, every president that ever will be. It's like, it basically said the core duties of the president, the core duties, anything they do, they can't be prosecuted for the core duties. In other words, if you send in SEAL Team 6 to kill bin Laden, you can't be prosecuted for that. If you declare Kurdistan a country, you can't be prosecuted for that, because it's like, those are your core duties as the president. Anything you do. Otherwise, it would just be chaos. They would be prosecuted for everything. Someone would bring a case against Obama for assassinating a U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, right? Which we all know that C3 does not agree with that decision. Even though he deserved to die, we don't agree with that decision because he was not given due process. And then there are cases that are like tangentially related to presidential, duties, and whether or not that can be prosecuted will be up to the circuit courts or something like that.
It's just whatever. Like, the courts that get the case. So I mean, I have the decision up right now.
And then the third one is personal stuff, like outside of your normal duties. So if the president goes and decides to assault a White House staffer, in the off hours, has nothing to do with their duties. They didn't like the food that day or whatever, and they assault them and beat them up and maybe even kill them. You could be prosecuted for that because that had nothing to do with your official duties. Now, what's interesting about whatever, I won't go down the legal road, but nothing's really changed here. I mean, it's pretty much status quo. It's like, okay, no, everyone kind of understood that, but no, now we got to take it in front of the Supreme Court and have it codified, which I believe that was pushed by Trump more than anyone else. And that has certain ramifications, but charges are still going to be brought against him in the cases that are outstanding. The case, what's interesting, Josh, is the case, the New York case. That one's interesting because they had Hope Hicks up there testifying about, some of the stuff that Trump's thought processes while he was doing his official duties, although it was related to the case. Now, in legalese, I'm not even going to speak legalese, but that could kind of compromise that whole case because he had people, or the prosecution brought people to testify who were actually working with him on official things and testify. It's kind of weird, right? It's that whole legal thing, and like one little thing wrong, one little chink in the case can bring the whole thing down. And as we know, the sentencing was supposed to be July 11th. They pushed that to September. And I think that's so that the judge and the prosecution can kind of get their ducks in a row and be like, man, are we going to have to retry this case? And is that double jeopardy? It's like everything's in flux right now. And, I hated it. I didn't want to really go down that legalese road because it's kind of boring. But yeah, Josh, I'm with you. It's just like people have lost their minds when you start talking about droning U.S. citizens, and the president can send in SEAL Team 6 to Mar-a-Lago. What I was going to say earlier is like, so the president orders, SOCOM. It's like, here's your order: plan a raid on Mar-a-Lago, a kill raid, and that order comes down to the SEAL team or whoever's going to execute that. It'd probably actually be whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's say it's military. Is that a lawful order?
No,
it's not. And
absolutely not.
It's not. And we have a system in place, and this is what everyone forgot about. we have a system in place that prevents things like that. You know, it just people lost their minds, and yeah, I'm kind of mystified. And I was texting you guys, and I'm just like, man, I'm starting to see how some people out there think, and that there are a few signs in this neighborhood. I live in a deep red area, but there are a few Beto signs and Biden stickers around here, and it makes me think. And I don't want to think this way about my fellow Americans. It's like this person, by virtue, I don't want to kill them by virtue, and I don't want them to die by virtue of who they voted for, especially not at my hand. Now, if they get what they deserve, like you guys are always saying, that's another thing entirely. That's just fate handing them, their just desserts. But I don't want them to die. They're still my fellow Americans. But I'm just like, man, you get a window into these people's thought processes, and it's like, well, you don't just want to kill Trump. You want to kill anyone who voted for him because they're just as much of a threat as he is because you voted for him. It's like, man, this is just, it really starts to, poison the way people think on both sides,
Yeah. Yep. So you're spot on. All the Supreme Court did was codify what has been known since the Constitution was ratified. All right.
Like common law, right? It was.
Yep. And so here's what it said. Here's what the decision said. And this is a direct quote: held under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. And he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts, like you laid out. You laid out some great examples. So, I mean, that's all they said. They're like, hey, yeah, you can't go back and try Barack Obama for droning a U.S. citizen without due process. Okay. And you're absolutely right. Guess what, folks? If you don't like that, if you don't like what Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution states and what a presidential's authorities are, then there's a process to change the Constitution. It's called the Constitutional Convention. The founders were so smart that they put in a process to change things when you don't like it. So, there you go. There you have it. So, Article 2, Section 3, all right, and this is obligations and responsibilities of the president. We've always encouraged folks to read, all right? Leaders are readers. I know I read a lot, Luke reads a lot, Roger reads a lot. We're always reading articles, we're always reading books and things to educate ourselves and try and understand why things are the way they are, and everything. If you have not read the Constitution from, cover to cover, I urge you to go do it. You're not going to understand some of the stuff in there. I don't understand everything in there. I've got to go back and look things up because there's words in there that have more than 2 syllables. And my Florida public school education fails me, more often than not. Yeah, Luke's holding his up. And I also have my copy right here. All right.
It's not a long read.
No, it's not a long read at all. And it's one thing, when you graduate. They do it when you graduate warrant officer candidate school, and they do it when you graduate OCS as well. One of the things, they hand you a copy of the Constitution, which is good, but they should hand you a copy of the Constitution in high school and be like, here you go. This is your copy forever and ever, and you need to read this thing. So Article 2, Section 3, he shall from time to time give to Congress information of the State of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them. And in the case of disagreement between them with respect to time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He shall receive ambassadors of the public members. He shall take care of the laws he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed and shall commission all the officers of the United States. Okay. So when you go back and you take a look at the oath that the president takes on Inauguration Day, is to uphold and defend the Constitution. So there you go. If what the president is doing is it falls within upholding and defending the Constitution and falls in line with what Article 2, Section 3 says, then that is in the course of his or her official duties. And that's for a court to decide on a case by case basis, because one of the other arguments that I saw was, well, they didn't outline what official, duties consist of. And it's like, well, the Supreme Court doesn't have to, because the Constitution does that. And if there's any gray area, then the courts will take that up on a case by case basis and determine it. The courts cannot sit there and say and give every single example of what may be in line with the president's constitutional duties, his official duties. And to think otherwise is silly. So the immunity case was really simple. It was like, okay, they codified what was already known, as you say, to be common law. To me, it was like, okay, well, that's a no brainer. As much as I would love to go back and charge Barack Obama with droning Al-Awlaki, who again needed to die, but he needed to die after due process, as any of us should receive under the Constitution. And then, not only did they get smacked with that one, but then they got smacked with Chevron being overturned. And Luke, I don't know, you want to fill folks in on Chevron?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Luke has brought this up a couple times, and he's laid out the example very good. Congress writes a law. Okay, we should have clean drinking water, and then the EPA, some unelected bureaucrat sitting in a cubicle in the EPA, lays out, all right, well, you have to do this, and this to have clean drinking water. These are all the fines you'll incur if you don't have clean drinking water. If you do this, and this, we're going to put you in jail. All right. Well, nobody elected that bureaucrat, that GS-14 sitting in the bowels of the EPA building. Nobody elected that guy. But Congress has gotten away for decades, ever since I think Chevron was mid-80s, 1983, 1984, when the Supreme Court ruled, well, the government's just going to defer to the quote unquote experts in these various executive branch agencies. Okay. If anybody who's listened to us for any amount of time knows that we detest most of the executive branch agencies because they were created, they are not congruent with the Constitution. And they're not constitutionally mandated. And a lot of these agencies are filled with folks who dictate your day-to-day life more so than the president of the United States. They dictate your day-to-day life more than anybody else, and they're unelected. And your recourse against them was nothing. You had very, very little recourse because of this Chevron. You go and you get a lawyer and you say, I'm going to sue the EPA. Well, once your case hit a court, the court looked at it, and they looked at the Chevron Supreme Court decision from the mid-80s and said, no, the law says we have to defer to the executive branch agency of, whatever, the lawsuit's against, and we have to defer to their quote unquote expertise. All right. Now, does that 14, that unelected bureaucrat sitting in a cubicle, are they really an expert? Are they an expert? Are they truly an expert? No, they're not. Because 9 out of 10 of them, they aren't scientists. And even today, it could be debated whether a lot of your scientists are quote unquote experts either. So the Supreme Court said, no, absolutely not. It's Congress's job to legislate, to write clear, concise legislation. And again, that's laid out in that neat little document called the Constitution. And man, the left lost their mind over that because it gutted the executive branch power. It gutted the power that the executive branch has over our day-to-day lives. Now, what that means, is that going to change a whole lot today? Is it going to change a whole lot next week? No. Is it going to change a whole lot over the next 10, 15 years? Yeah, it should. All right. That's TBD, but the groundwork has now been laid for folks to start challenging a lot of these rules that the executive branch, various agencies have laid upon us. All right. And that's everything from the ATF, the EPA, Department of Education, everything. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It would have changed a lot during COVID.
Oh,
A
100%. Oh, sure.
lot. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that it may change in the short term. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of challenges to things in the short term. And we're talking like the next 4 or 5 years. In the midterm, where you're talking like 5 to 10 years, I don't think much will change, because if laws have to be more detailed, and explicit, well, then all they're going to do is, make these, 5,000 page bills that, well, we got to pass it so you can find out what's in it, because our system is so hopelessly broken. And all it's going to do is, Congress is going to hire more staffers to write these things. It's just going to be more lawyers on all the staffs writing these bills. I think it's a step in the right direction, but we got a lot more steps to take before we fix like the root of the poison problem that we're facing with bureaucracy. Sure. Step in the right direction though. And then what was the third one? There was the immunity, Chevron, and then what was the other one?
So the third one was the obstruction for the January 6th defendants. I think.
Yeah.
Well, I forget what it was called, Nichols or something. Again, I can't, but it basically said that they can't. The Department of Justice could not use obstruction, because a lot of January 6th defendants were charged for obstruction for obstructing an official government proceeding. Well, that's not what obstruction generally means. Obstruction generally means you actively destroyed evidence, you hid evidence, you lied under, an official testimony to, keep the government at whatever level from finding out the truth. All right. And that's not what, the charges were levied against them. I think, was it Fisher? I think it was Fisher. And the Supreme Court ruled that no, you can't use obstruction in that manner, because that's not what it means. And that's not what, they went back and looked at precedent, or, at other, also referred to as stare decisis. Stare decisis is like, no, that's not what obstruction means. That's not what it's meant for a very long time. So yeah, it was not a good week to be a leftist. Joe Biden kicked things off on, Thursday of last week with the disaster of debate performance. And then they got handed 3 Supreme Court case decisions in a row that did not go their way.
Do you still believe what Benjamin Franklin said, that we'd be better off just appointing the first, 3 pages of the Boston Directory or whatever it was? Maybe it wasn't Ben Franklin that said that, but just get a national phone directory, pick names out of a hat, and then put them in Congress. Put them in these positions, and we'd probably be better off than where we are now. Do you still agree with that? Not better off, but we'll be worse off.
Yeah. I go back and forth sometimes on that. I think, and I know Roger disagrees, but I think it would not matter who's in that, who is sitting in, the Senate or the House, if there are no term limits, because absolute power corrupts. Yeah. And I will venture to say, those within the Senate and the House, they wield a lot more power than the President of the United States.
Well, let's say there's term limits then. Let's say there's 2-term limit. Like, what do you think then?
2-term limit? Yeah. Then I think we'd be fine. I think you could go put anybody in those positions, and it'd be whatever.
The reason I ask is, oftentimes, as we've talked about on this podcast multiple times, that sentence, it made sense, but I didn't like it after it came out of my mouth. We've talked about it before. How about that? My faith in the average American is shaken quite often. And I've said it on this podcast and to you guys time and time again. Joe Sixpack, that's the average American. Joe Sixpack will put up with just about anything as long as Joe Sixpack has his AC, his Wi-Fi, his new iPhone, and food in the refrigerator, right? I've often said that. But at the same time, unlike you, I hold out a little faith that the average American may be weak, maybe a P, but there is a bit of like, you're not going to pass this one by me. It's like, I'm not that stupid. Your average factory worker is not stupid, And when I see a headline like this is why one of the reasons, I don't mean to take this off the rails, but one of the reasons I'm like, this could be a blowout, because the AP puts out a whole article, and the headline of the article is this: Biden at 81, sharp and focused, but sometimes confused and forgetful. Now, you don't have to be an Aristotelian expert in logic to understand that headline is all jacked up. Let me read it again. Biden at 81, sharp and focused, but sometimes confused and forgetful. Joe Sixpack, that's an AP article. Somebody wrote that went through the editorial board, the desk, and said, yep, put that out. I think the average American, if they see that headline, is like, yeah, no. Like your average factory worker, your average union member, things like that are like, no, that doesn't make any sense. If my boss said that to me, or a coworker said something stupid like that to me, no, they don't believe it. This isn't like we talk about 1984 and, George Orwell and all that stuff. This is not even 1984. This is just dumb. That's just a dumb headline. We're not to the point where something like that is going to be, that wouldn't even be in the book 1984. A headline like that. It's too clumsy. It's too dumb. It's just, I don't know. I'm sorry to take it off the rails away from the Supreme Court stuff, but I think, your average Joe Sixpack is kind of like, okay, I'm starting to see through this. I texted a family member. I have a family member that's liberal. This person absolutely should not be liberal. They're very aged, shall we say, in their 70s. And after the debate, I texted him, and I'm just like, look, you have to understand this is messed up. He didn't text me back. So I texted him something about boxing, and he immediately texted me back like 2 days later. So it's like, I know you read that. But certainly he's seeing this, and he's like, yeah, this isn't right, because he's a few years younger than Joe Biden. But it's like, dude, you have to recognize this is out of line. And so people like that, Josh, if Biden does run, are they going to show up and vote, or are they just not going to vote at all? Or are they going to vote for RFK Jr., who ate a dog?
I saw that. That's wild.
He's saying it's a goat.
Yeah. Hey, you know what though? Here's the thing. He was in Korea, right?
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's no secret to anybody, who's traveled the world. Hey, man, people eat different things in different countries. Roger is out stimulating the economy of Europe right now. And, he made the comment. He was like, damn, man. He was like, we just left the country and I didn't get to try the horse meat, because whatever in that country, they cook horses. They eat horses. Okay. So, for people were like, a little bit of a tangent here, but people were freaking out because they're like, I can't believe RFK Jr. was, making fun of, like he was eating a dog or something like that. It's like, have you ever been to Korea? Guess what they eat there? They eat dogs. If you go to Ecuador, they eat what they call cuy. And anybody who wants to know what cuy is, look it up. So, I mean, if it was, you have a picture of me eating cuy, are you going to, oh my God, he's eating cuy. I can't believe that. That's just terrible. I mean, it's not like he's Christy Nome. He's not out shooting dogs.
It's kind of like xenophobic. It's a little bit xenophobic. And it's like, oh, well, so you don't accept other cultures. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in a country a not so palatable country to be in, and we were eating a bunch of seafood, and the medic that was with us was very insistent that we try one certain dish, and it was the biggest one. It's right in the middle of the table, and you just reach your hands out and you take it. So we all did, and it tastes a little bit like pork, but not quite. It kind of have a seafoody taste. It's off a rib, because I don't. It's one of the reasons I don't eat meat off the bone anymore, or I try not to. I steer away from it. Kind of scarred me. So it's like I'm taking the meat off the bone, eating it. It's like that's odd. It's like a fishy pork. Is what it was like. So after we all had some, it was coming close to the end of the meal. The medic takes out his knife and he's like, "You see that? Did y'all like that? Did you like what you ate? You just ate porpoise. You just ate dolphin. You ate flipper." And I felt really weird after eating, because dolphins have a pretty advanced brain, right? It's the closest to the human brain, along with whales.
Smart.
Yeah, and it's their brains are closer to ours than chimpanzees or whatever. And I just felt weird eating that. I still feel bad about eating that. It's like, what's the next step? What I'm going to eat human next? But yeah, you're spot on. It's like, man, different cultures are different. I wouldn't want to eat dog, but if I did, I wouldn't be the end of the world. Horse. Yeah. I've eten horse before. I feel weird eating horse.
Yeah,
it does feel weird.
Here, put it in this perspective, and I don't think a lot of people who are lamenting RFK for Junior for doing that is okay. So you're sitting in a source meet in country X, and they bring you their local delicacy. You're not going to eat it. You're going to run the risk of offending them and not eating that, So
haven't you grown out of that though?
I've grown out of that a little bit, but at the end of the day, if I'm, and I don't know what capacity RFK was there in, right, when, he took that photo, but hey man, I, like most of us, traveled around the world. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things. If I'm somewhere, hey, this is the local thing to try to eat, and somebody offers it to me, and especially if I'm looking at them, and this is more food than these people will eat in a week, and they offer it to me, I'm not going to offend them. I'm going to try it at least. I'm going to take a bite. I might not finish it. I might not, ask for seconds, but I'm going to take a bite. It's like when I was in the Balkans, dude, like literally from goat to glass was the span of, 2 minutes. And, when I get offered that, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to try it at least. Yeah. And it's just, to me, it's one of those things like, yeah, I've grown out of that whole, like, I'll try and find it. If I just really just cannot do it, don't want to do it, I'll find an excuse. But at the end of the day, I don't know what capacity he was there in. You're meeting with some, diplomat or business partner. You're trying to close a multi-million-dollar deal, whatever. Bro, they offer you some dog. Guess what? You got some kimchi or some hot sauce to go with it. They'll kill the taste. Like, hey man, let's do this.
Yeah, there are situations where, and you just outlined it, where it's like, yeah, you just go ahead and do it. But the first time I had enough experience under my belt to very politely refuse, in a situation where you can, they understand. In Afghanistan, where they're trying to give me that curdled ass milk, where it's like, I know this is going to make me sick. I know it's going to make me sick. And I found a way. It was the first time I did. It's the first time I refused. I didn't refuse. I was very politely. It was like, no, not for me. I really like this over here. I'm going to stick with this. And they're like, oh yeah, they get it. Yeah. But there are cases like you outlined. It's like, yeah, you do it. You do it.
Yeah.
God Almighty, that curdled. What God Almighty? I guess if you eat something enough, your body just gets used to it. But man, there was stuff in Afghanistan that would quite literally make your average American deathly ill for days. Oh, yeah. just taking one spoonful of it. God,
dude. So the warm goat milk, right?
Oh,
So we're in the Balkans, and I get handed a glass of warm goat milk. They literally just milked the goat. Like, I mean, they just milked the goat minutes ago. And so hey man, I'm a young Joe. This was, one of my first source meets, and I'm like, all right, man, it's when in Rome. So I take a swig of it, and this, like, I don't know, it was just it was a little bit clumpy. It wasn't like clumpy, but it was just, a little bit that it congealed in the, the couple minutes that had been in the glass that slid down the back of my throat, like really slow. And it took every ounce of my being. It took, it took every ounce of physical and mental fortitude that I had not to vomit all over that table. And then all the other places that we've eaten stuff. The Cuy in Ecuador, absolutely. It was hands down some of the so basically, if for folks who may not know what Cuy is, think of a nutria. All right. So our friend Leaf lives in Louisiana. He's south of I-10, Louisiana, right? So he's straight Cajun coon ass, right? He knows what nutria is. He probably eats these things 3-4 times a week. Uh, he puts it in his boudin. So what they do is they take these big rodents, it's like the rouse, right? Rodents of unusual size from the Princess Bride, and they deep fry it, but they don't field dress it or anything. They knock it in the head, kill it, and then they dump it into a deep fryer. So everything is still inside of it, and then they put it on a platter and serve it up. Right? I mean, innards and all. But that was bad. But one of the worst things. So when I was in Ethiopia, and Ethiopian food's amazing. I think it's fantastic. But you go to you go to a restaurant, it's community seating, and they bring it out in this massive round dish that's sitting on top of this thin layer of bread. And I can't remember what the bread is called, but it's, you got a pile of rice, a pile of, your various meats, right? You got a pile of goat, you got a pile of chicken, and everybody at that table, you just take what you want by hand. And so you just reach over and you grab a handful of chicken and you take it and you put it on your plate and you eat. And then, whoever else is sitting at that table, they reach over and grab a handful of chicken out of that same pile and you just keep going, right? Till you're done. And you're just kind of like, look at there. You're like, that dude hasn't washed his hands. Like, I don't even know this dude's name. And we're grabbing handfuls of rice out of the same pile. That was, whew, the food was good, man. But you're like, remind me to take my Cipro when we get back to the hotel.
Yeah, I do, dude.
Because I don't want to wind up with dysentery.
That's why I've got this parasite that will never go away. Have I told you about this?
No.
Yeah. So similar situation. I'm sure it came from the shared food thing that you're describing. Different country, but same idea. I've got this parasite because probably I didn't take Cipro right after. I didn't have any. I didn't have anything, and so probably about 6 years or so, it happens every 6 years. This thing is just living in my intestine. There's no way to get rid of it. The doctors told me what it was. It's named after an African country. But I'll look it up and I'll send it to you. This thing, you can't get rid of it. The only way to get rid of it is to kill, to be dead. This thing is, once it gets in you, it's in you. Every 6 years or so, this thing will flare up. And man, it's just liquid coming out of both ends, man, for about 4 days. And then you're fine. You're laid up for 4 days. You're not going to die. IVs will help, but you're not going to die. What I worry about is when I get old, if it flares up, could be bad. But basically, when this thing comes on, Josh, look it up. Once I send you what I've got, I know it's coming on because about a day, or it's only happened to me 3 times now. About a day or two before it actually starts hitting, I'll start burping, and I can kind of taste, that kind of tastes like rotten eggs. But man, you can smell my burps from across the room. It smells like straight sulfur. Like Well, I guess it hasn't happened since my wife and I have been married. So any day now. But it's like I can burp like a little, like a little tiny one. And somebody on the other end of the room, like, geez. I mean, like straight up sulfur. It happened to me when I was at the det. And I burped in Team 2 room, and everybody, I think Chris T was there, and he's like, good God. Whoa. He was like probably 15 feet away, and he smelled it like immediately after. It was crazy. And I think it was from that sharing. I think I got it from that. But this thing builds a pagoda in my gut every 6 or 7 years, and it's brutal for about a week, 4 days or so. But so real quick, not real quick, we got a few minutes left. So Josh, I've got, when you're a youngster, your favorite holiday is always Christmas, right? Because you get the presents, and then by far, and Christmas is still a great holiday. The true reason for the season and all that stuff, still one of my favorites. Definitely in the top three. But as I grow older, the two that are my favorites are Thanksgiving and 4th of July. Not in that order. 4th of July is my favorite, and then Thanksgiving. I just love them. Always means a lot to me. 4th of July, Independence Day, and we're recording before 4th of July. Obviously, by the time y'all listen, this will be after 4th of July. Love eating me some hot dogs. Everybody seems pretty happy on 4th of July. Fireworks going off. The dogs definitely don't like it, but I do. Just a good time, and being in the States on the 4th of July, we've been gone for a lot of them. Just kind of adds to that meaning of it, for me, it's my favorite holiday, and, people trying to diminish it and stuff always pisses me off, but yeah, it's just my favorite, man. That's tomorrow. Looking forward to it. It's weird when 4th of July is on a Thursday, because it's either a super long weekend, or if you're in the private sector, it's like, well, you're going to have to take PTO. If it's on a Thursday, bitch, you come to work on Friday unless you're taking PTO, But either way, there's only two times a year I eat hot dogs, Memorial Day and July 4th. I'll eat them if someone puts them in front of me, but I try to eat a few hot dogs on those 2 days. But looking forward to it, man. Just a day off. It's nice and warm here. What are your plans for the 4th tomorrow?
But we have zero plans. We're gonna hang out at the we'll hang out at the house. I think our younger two have to. Well, no, our middle daughter, I think she works tomorrow for a little while. Because Chick-fil-A is not closed on the 4th of July because it doesn't fall on Sunday. So we may pop into Chick-fil-A, go get some milkshakes, in the middle of the day, and say hey to her, and then like I said at the very beginning, we're going to go down to one end of our neighborhood and watch all the illegal fireworks get set off. Once it gets dark, we usually set some off ourselves as well. But I think we used the last of ours up this past New Year's Eve, and I just I've obviously been traveling a lot, but I haven't traveled back down to to South Carolina, to south of the border or anything to get the really good ones. Because if you want good fireworks, I know you can get them a lot of other places, but man, South Carolina and Alabama. I remember, growing up, we would drive over to Alabama because you go over there and man, you could get the really, really good ones. And I remember, the last 4th of July we spent down at my parents' house in Georgia. We drove over to Alabama and we got some, and we lit some mortars off, and I didn't realize that they were professional grade. But when they went off, and my parents live out in the country, like they live out in the country, right? You want to go to Walmart, it's a 30-minute drive in either direction. The little town they live in is 1 block big. They have a traffic light. That's it. They don't have a McDonald's, nothing. They have a general store where you can go get propane. You can rent porta potties and you can buy some Carhartt shirts and jeans, and that's it. But we lit one off that even my dad was like, ooh, Like, yeah, man, the sheriff might pay attention to that one. It was massive, massive. And so we went back to Alabama and got some more. And but yeah, that's our plans for tomorrow, man. I got up this morning and before 9 o'clock, I touched up the yard, trimmed the bushes out front, and trimmed our crepe myrtles up a little bit. So tomorrow, just sit around and post July 4th memes making fun of the British.
Yeah.
And yeah,
No tech.
we
They
really
don't
have any
get it.
plans.
I was in
No.
Afghanistan one year, and we had our July 4th party, because that's what the Americans do. We we invite everybody over, and I was doing the Steve McQueen from The Great Escape. When they on July 4th when they're serving all that hooch, and he's telling the Brits that come through, no taxation without representation. And in the movie, the Brits are laughing, but in real life, they don't laugh. They don't think it's funny,
Nope.
But one thing I asked you guys this, and you guys, I think, or at least you, Josh, probably already knew, but I did not realize, didn't really sink in till today, the ages of some of the founding fathers who signed the document. I'll just read some of them off here. You got James Monroe, 18. Aaron Burr, 20. Alexander Hamilton, 21. James Madison, 25. Thomas Jefferson, 33. John Adams, 40. Paul Revere, 41. And George Washington, 44. Now, at the time, Benjamin Franklin was 70. So he was the old man in the group, right? 70, right? I mean, he had to be a hardy
ancient
dude
for that time.
Yeah, ancient. So, but I would have figured, it's very surprising how young they were. It's like Paul Revere, 41. I would have figured he would be more like James Monroe's age, like 18. You figure dude, his ride and everything. You'd figure, but 41, I mean, these dudes were young, and it's like, now check the ages of our three branches of government in 2024. But it's just amazing. I know James Monroe at age 18 didn't draft, he didn't draft it, the Declaration, but at the same time, he had, those people around him, these brilliant minds, which you were touching on earlier, man, it's all built in there. There are checks on all these things. They were brilliant the way they put this together, but they trusted James Monroe at the age of 18 enough to be there to sign it. So the dude must have done something. I mean, at 18, dude was probably married with 3 kids at 18, but still, it's amazing. It truly is amazing and that's why I believe it was divine. I truly do. The way they came up with that Declaration, then the Constitution, and it was passion, it was knowledge, and I believe there was some divine, there was some providence there to bring all these men together at the same time under the same circumstances to come up with this truly great system of government. It may be corrupted now, but it's a great philosophy. There's very few holes in it. Michael Malice might disagree, but I think there's very few holes in it. It's as close, in my opinion, as you can come to a perfect system of government in theory as it can get. That's my opinion. It's been corrupted. People have found loopholes. But if you just stick with the document, stick with the system, and don't stray from it, it's a pretty damn good system. The problem is we haven't stuck with it. We've strayed from it,
I absolutely agree. There's nothing you said I disagree with. Is it perfect? Like you said, are there some holes in it here and there? Sure, but there is not a better system anywhere in the world. There's not a better system that's ever existed in recorded human history than the Constitution. I think the only when we talk about writings, the only writing greater than the Constitution of the United States is the Bible. That's
100%.
Those are the 2 greatest writings in human history.
Do you think that when Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, I wonder how close they were when they signed it? Like, was Aaron Burr first and then Alexander Hamilton? Do you think they understood, or they would have imagined that, 18 years later, Aaron Burr would gun down Alexander Hamilton in a duel? I mean, man, dude. They were very, very dedicated to their beliefs.
Yeah, for sure.
Lord.
I think we should bring back dueling, or at least, it was funny because I was talking to my wife earlier. We were, just talking about the current state of things, and I was like, I think dueling should be a thing again, and she was like, well, I would just settle for, the fist fight out behind the gym at 3 in the afternoon. Like that would probably solve some problems too. And I was like, you're not wrong.
You're not wrong, but you really be dedicated if you're going to duel somebody. It's like, man,
oh yeah,
because I may get my ass kicked in a fist fight, but like a duel,
you're not gonna
like
die.
think about dueling with like Marty, right? Marty doesn't listen, but think about dueling with him. It's like, ooh, yeah, not so sure. I might need to brush up on my skills a little bit before I take this stance.
Oh yeah, dude. No, dude. Dueling with him would be like, dueling. It would be like the, in Tombstone, when Wyatt Earp's like, I can't beat him, can I? Doc Holliday's like, nope, you sure can. Yeah, that's probably not going to go well for you. But when you think about the ages, like you said, and I had not thought about that really until you brought it up, until you mentioned it earlier. You're like, and you started looking at it, like, James were 18 years old. 18 years old, and this guy signed a document knowing that, basically when, he signed on, basically to the revolution and all the founding fathers, they knew it's like, hey, it's like George Washington said, it's only treason if we lose. They knew that, but they knew that, hey, if we lose, that's it. You might as well die on the battlefield because you're going to swing from the gallows. And you take a look at the founding father. I'm trying to think of what I was doing when I was 18 years old, as opposed to James Monroe. James Monroe, when he was 18 years old, he signed, one of the greatest documents ever written. And I was 18 years old, and I was like, dude, I'm trying to figure out how to put gas in my car. And just graduated high school, and I was definitely not. I did not have, a structure of government on my mind. I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing Friday night? And how can I have some fun? It is truly amazing. It's completely different. Obviously a completely different time.
I might do some reading on that. Like, what brought James Monroe into that circle? Was it his dad that died recently, and his dad had educated him, or something like that? Because it's fascinating. Because, like you said, like in the big picture, I didn't do anything truly exceptional. I probably still haven't, but especially at the age of 18. Are you kidding me? I mean, yeah, I did neuroplasticity and or whatever, the brain mature. It's like, man, it was just what brought him to that point, and Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, 20 and 21, and it's not that much older. Like, how did they get to that point? And this was kind of before the university system and all that stuff. Well, so I'll have to look into it, just that because it's fascinating to me.
I mean, you had higher learning back then, right? I mean, you had some folks who were, lawyers and whatnot, but you think about that. Think about the founding fathers. All right. Think about, a lot of them dual language. All right. A lot of them could read Latin. Some of them spoke Latin. I think Benjamin Franklin, on all his trips, he spoke at least some level of French, based on his trips and time spent in France. We used to teach Latin, Greek, some of the other, non, Latin's a love language, but some of the other languages in high school. And now we teach remedial English in college. We are no longer we are not on an angelic ascendancy right now when it comes to education. A large part of that is the No Child Left Behind. That's for another episode. But you think about the founding fathers, their ages, and what they accomplished, and then compare it to what you were doing at the same age. like you said, these guys were doing things that were exceptional. I don't know that I've done anything that's really exceptional, except for I think having the title of husband and father has been exceptional, but that's
Boom.
no different. I mean, those guys were the same. They were husbands and fathers as well, and then they went on to to do what they did, and it is amazing. It's truly amazing what they accomplished, at their ages. And you think about what we're doing at our ages and what we've done, or the average. Think of the average American at their age. It's like, wow, yeah. It's
Well, one of the things they taught back then, and it's scoffed at now because it's been perverted like everything else. But they taught these men, these young men, because back then women weren't allowed to learn, but they taught these young men philosophy. They taught them classic philosophy, and classic philosophy is a lot of logic. It's critical thinking. It's how to think. It's how to deconstruct something. Or an argument or a way of thinking. And we don't teach that anymore. You have to actively seek that out at the university level to find logic, and real philosophy. It's just, it's different, we don't educate people. Like you were saying, we don't educate people the way they were back in the day. What's important, what's important in my opinion, what's important in education is, like I said, learning how to think, learning how to be a critical thinker. I'm not an expert at it, but I do have some education in it. A lot of times you learn the hard way. I think Roger and Josh are very critical thinkers. We think outside the box, deconstruct arguments. Sometimes we get pretty heated, but yeah, just learning how to think, being open-minded, not believing every single thing that comes across, this fed into your brain. And that was part of the problem with COVID, right? It's like, nah, some of this shit doesn't make sense, man. It's not, applying some critical thinking just doesn't make sense. And, I don't know. That's one of the things, is that people are just educated differently now. It's just a check the box, high school, college, all that. Yeah. You got to actively seek out how to think critically. I don't care if we run over 2 hours. I don't care, Josh. Roger's
I
not
don't
here.
care.
The timekeeper's not here, so whatever.
Exactly.
Let's Joe Rogan this. No, let's Sean Ryan this and go for 5.5 hours. Why not?
That guy, so I got a couple of comments on him. But when you talk about how we're not educated properly, so UC Berkeley, all right, take that for what it's worth. The University of Miami, Stanford, and then Berkeley College of Music. Berkeley College of Music, I get, but the others, guess what they offer now? They now offer classes on Taylor Swift, the life of Taylor Swift. That is a college. That is a college level course, the life of Taylor Swift. And people wonder why, people look at college degrees now and they go, I don't care if you have a college degree. That doesn't mean anything anymore, by and large. Uh, I get, okay, Berkeley College of Music. You want to do a class on Taylor Swift and her music? Got it. Hey, that I can get. I get that. But okay, Stanford University. Okay, all right, folks. Because Stanford there for a long time. It's considered that. Yeah, hey man, you got a degree from Stanford. It's like, oh wow, you accomplished something. Now you're like, so who cares? Did you take a Taylor Swift class? Yeah, put that in the shredder. That's garbage. Sean Ryan, though, like for people out there listening, Sean Ryan probably has the second best podcast out there after C3. The guy is when it comes to interviewing guests, and all of his podcasts have guests. He doesn't do any just by himself where he's doing monologues or anything like that. He's like he's like Joe Rogan. He always it's always him and another person. He is probably one of the best interviewers that I've seen. You know, how he gets his guests to open up and to talk, and how he, you know, prompts them, you know, throughout there. I I think is phenomenal. I like his setup. I like his lighting. You know, his visual for everything. His post production. I think it's phenomenal. I think he has a fantastic show, and you know, his background, in his background, he can relate to his guests as well, right? So, you know, Sean Ryan's a former SEAL. He's a former ground branch guy. Uh, you know, you know, the guy's been there and done that. You know, he's no slouch, but at the same time, he is super humble. Never talks about himself, right? You
Christian
know,
too.
yeah. You know, and he's a Christian. He's a conservative. Uh, you know, and so, you know, after you get done listening to your daily dose of C3, get over there and you know, and check Sean Ryan out.
I'll tell
And
you.
the people he has on are they're interesting folks. You know, I mean, he's had some of the same folks on that we've had on. You know, with the Satterleys and everything, and yeah, the the ones he did, you know, you pointed out the ones he did with Eric Prince. Those, man, straight fire,
Mhm.
straight fire.
Well, you know, it's just there's something to be said for being open minded. You know, there's something to be said for hearing other voices because, you know, I told you guys, man, you should really listen to the Chris Beck you know, the Chris Beck, when Chris Beck appeared on Sean Ryan's show. Because Chris Beck, to remind you of y'all of who Chris Beck was or is, he was the SEAL. Remember back, I guess it was 2012, 14, so somewhere in there, who it made the news and everything that Chris Beck is going to transition to be a woman. And it's like all of us were like, what the hell? You know, Navy SEAL, he was part of SEAL Team 6 at one point, part of DevGru. And this guy transitioned to female. It's like, that's the last we ever heard of him. Oh, that's the SEAL who transitioned to be a female. That guy's all messed up. So I was like, why on earth would I listen to that? And, you know, Sean Ryan brought him on. It was like almost a 6-hour podcast where, you know, Chris Beck talked for about 5 hours of that. Then they brought on his current fiance, who is a female. And spoiler alert, Chris Beck is detransitioning to go back to male. And, you know, they go through the whole thing of why he went down that path and what led him to that. But they also deconstruct his career. And when they talked about the part where he transitioned everything, what led him to that, it gives you a window. And he, by the way, he is totally against it. He's very anti-transing the kids and all that stuff. But you get a window into how this can happen to people in general. It really opens your mind. It's like, okay, now I get a window onto how this can happen. How this can happen to a person who was part of SEAL Team 6, who was a SEAL, who was a hard charger, grew up on a farm. It was fascinating. But take that aside. The first 3.5, 4 hours, he talked about his career. And there is no arguing. This guy is a gifted mind. I mean, this guy's got some stuff going on in his brain. Like, Josh, you should give it a listen, man. I mean, the stuff that this guy was talking about, it's like, okay, even if he's 50% full of crap, he's still 150 times smarter than I am. You know, it was fascinating. And I don't know why I listened to it. I think I saw a clip on like Facebook Reels or something of him talking. I was like, okay, I need to listen to that. It's fascinating. And Sean Ryan is willing to bring people on like that. You know, he brought on Tucker Carlson. He brings on these people, and I agree, Josh. It's a great podcast. It really is. It's that long form stuff. He knows how to interview. Very rarely talks about himself. And he's not afraid to proclaim his faith. I admire the dude. And, you know, Darren, I always tell Darren, you need to listen to this guy. You know, you need to put this on your thing because number one, he's a SEAL, and we all know how much Darren loves SEALs. But I mean, he's just good, dude. He's really good, and I'm happy for him. And he's got the two things that I hate, Josh: SEAL and CIA. It's like that's two strikes, like right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I will say, ground branch, a lot of times I'll give those guys a pass.
The ground, God, the ground branch guys. I don't know if I've ever told this uh, on the podcast. So I'm in Syria, in northern Syria, and it's like we had to go over and talk to those bubbas, and so me and a couple other dudes roll over there, and we link up with them, and I'm like, hey man, I'm Josh, how you doing? And this dude introduced himself. He's like, hey bro, I'm Condor. And I just look
I
at him.
remember this story.
I just look at him, and I normally, especially when it comes to engaging with our interagency partners, I try not to be an asshole, right? I just try, like, hey man, because at the end of the day, it's not about me. I'm representing our organization, I'm representing our community, but I don't know what it was. It caught me at an off top. Maybe I had a cold and I was jet lagged. I don't know. But I just looked flat at that dude. And I said, "That's not your name." He was, everybody kind of like, "What?" Everybody's kind of like, "Look like what?" And I looked at him, I said, he was like, I said, "Your mom didn't name you Condor. Your name's not Condor." I said, "At least come up with a good, like, your name's John Smith. Like, hey man, my name's John. Like, I don't care what your real name is, but I know it's not Condor." And he was just kind of like stared at me. He stared at me like for a solid minute. And then somebody else was like, "All right, let's go inside." And we finally, we got inside. We handled our business and did what we needed to do. But it was just like, effing clown. Your name's
Well,
not like, shut up.
and that's
It's like, gah.
It's a bad name too, because like, isn't a condor like basically a vulture? Like
Yes.
it's a vulture. It's like you
Yeah.
named yourself that because you had 3 days of the condor.
Yeah, it
Cool,
scavenges
bro.
roadkill.
My name's Nighthawk.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like, what was that for? Step Brothers.
Yeah, Step Brothers. Yeah.
And you're just like, hey man, hey, what's up, bro? My name's Condor. I was like, dude, at least come up with a fake, like, real name, right? If you don't want to tell me your real name, I get it. But then then I got then somebody tried to educate me on, well, everybody in the agency, when they have call signs that they earn or they're given and blah blah. And I just looked at him. I said, that's not their name. And guess what? I'm not in the agency. So no.
I think I get
it's
less
so ridiculous.
I think I would get less pissed off about Condor. Kind of letting y'all behind the curtain, and none of this is classified, by the way. It's just stupid shit that the agency does that doesn't make any sense. And if it is classified, they're stupid because everybody knows it. But if I'm meeting an agency guy and he tells me his name is Condor, I'm going to have a similar reaction to Josh and be like, okay, I might not say that's not your real name, but I might like, take the deep breath, like, okay, Condor, but when an agency guy says his name is Mike, that's what starts to piss me off. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah. Oh, your name is Mike. That's a big thing. It's like, if you want to see someone who's low key, like the kids say, like the Gen Zers say, low key, someone who's low key bragging about the fact that they're in the agency and, bro, I can't tell you who I really am. They'll say their name is Mike. It's like, dude, your name is not Mike. To me, Mike comes across as Condor. It's like, come on. You know how many agency guys, Josh, I've met who said their name was Mike? It's like, come on, dude. Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing the agency does, and I learned this recently, and I learned it from open source research, is that agency guys who think that they're the bomb diggity, they call themselves John. They call themselves, like, agency guys, we're John. NSA guys are Paul. DIA, yeah, it goes like that. And DOD intel guys are Ringo. They name themselves after the Beatles. Like, in the intel community, DOD intel is Ringo because no one knows them. They don't do anything important, and they're just like the forgotten Beatle. That they do that. So And I learned that, Josh, from when I was trashing. One of my favorite hobbies is trashing Michael Hayden. I hate Michael Hayden. I've got an unreasonable hate for former CIA Director
I
General
want to fight
Michael
that. I
Hayden.
want to fight that
Oh
dude.
my God. Ugh. But I talked some trash on him, and then this guy was saying, you know, he was saying code words and stuff, and people like us know what he's saying. And we're like, bro, come on. We know who you are. Why are you doing this? And he goes, okay, Ringo. And I'm like, Ringo, what does that mean? So I started doing, I was like, why did he say that? Because I was like, Ringo, okay, you're talking about Ringo Starr, because you're not talking about the Johnny Depp, movie with the chameleon, right?
You're
So,
not
and
talking.
that's
Yeah,
what,
you're not talking about Ringo from Tombstone.
right? Yes, yeah. Yeah, I should have gone out of the Tombstone route, not the Johnny Depp chameleon movie. You're right. Wow, you called me out on that one. But I did some research, and it's like, yeah, that's they're John. They're the creative one that drove the Beatles. You know, NSA is Paul, who, also does a lot of work. And then the rest of us are Ringo, because we don't do anything. And it's like, okay. And then I called him out. You remember that? I called him out. And I was like, okay, now I know
That's
exactly who
right.
you are. You probably shouldn't have exposed yourself like that. And then he like blocked us, deleted the tweet, all that stuff. It
Yep.
was awesome, bro. It was awesome. It was a high point of my Twitter X career right there. Man, I
The
hate
high
the
water mark.
CIA. Man, I hate the
It's
CIA. I could tell a lot of stories.
yeah. There, not only, and this is for another podcast that we could go hours on. Not only did they have JFK killed, but I mean, when you talk about, just loss after loss after loss, you take a look at everything from the Bay of Pigs all the way up, to today, right? They're still getting they are still getting their ass handed to them, day in and day out, under, Barry's administration, right? The lost opportunity in Iran, the lost opportunity under the Biden administration in Cuba. Um, I mean, just continuously caught flat footed. And they'll be like, and then they'll turn around and they'll say, oh, well, we did this or that. And, they're like, well, we found Baghdadi and we found bin Laden. It's like, okay, well, even if you did, you didn't kill him. All right.
You didn't build that.
DOD did that. What's that?
You didn't build that.
Exactly. Yeah,
the old Obama quote.
That's right. Yeah, you didn't build that.
So I gotta qualify, Josh, because it killed me right after I trashed him. It's like, look, I don't want to say too much, but I'll say this: like, one of the men I know who I respect him a lot. He works for that agency, and there are exceptions. There are always exceptions. This guy's a true believer.
Sure.
He's a great guy, and I don't know if he listens or not, but I know he has in the past, and I don't want him to think that I'm trashing him in particular. He knows who he is. There are good people, so I shouldn't trash everyone. I shouldn't say all of them are dog shit. I shouldn't say that, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I know my experiences. My experience with him was an outlier. That's all I'm saying, and they need people like that.
Yep.
But unfortunately, people like him will never rise to the top because he's too practical. He's too
Yep.
much of a true believer. He believes in, he believes in the reason they believed it needed to be stood up in the first place. So I'm not talking about him in particular, just qualifying that right there.
No, and I agree with you. All of my interactions with that organization, the preponderance of them have been negative. And it's, the exceptions are the good experiences, and that should not be, that should be opposite, right? Whether it's whether it's in an embassy environment, whether it's in a tactical, deployed environment, my interactions with them have largely been negative, and a lot of it comes from just hubris. A lot of it just comes from hubris, right? It's like, well, I went to an Ivy League school, and I went and spent 6 months learning how to do certain things, and I've been groomed, and I'm the anointed one, and it's okay. And then I've actually I haven't known them personally, but I've known of them. They wound up and they went into a tactical environment in Afghanistan, and they got killed, and they got killed largely due to their hubris. uh it's like, oh, well, I'm glad you went to an Ivy League school. It got you killed because of your hubris. And you take a look at what happened in Fob Chapman, and I think that was what, December '09. Uh, you know, a lot of people got killed from that agency because of their hubris. And at the end of the day, if you ask me, hey, would you put up an analyst, from that agency, or would you take, an analyst from the Army and put them up against, or the analysts from the Marine Corps? I would be like, give me the DoD analyst every day of the week and twice on Sunday, because they, you know, that's probably somebody. Maybe they have a college degree, maybe they don't, but I know that's somebody who's lived that thing every day, day in and day out, and it's not somebody who, you know, has a pedigree. Who, they're like, well, I don't need to. Those are the guys who I don't need to study for the exam because I'm super smart. Then they go in and they, they're like, ooh, they barely pass it, as opposed to the guy who's like, hey, man, I'm average intelligence, so I really got to dig into this. And they go in and, they score a 92 on it. But they put in the work because they know, like, hey, I might not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm going to do the legwork to get it done. If that makes sense.
It does. And when Wild Bill Donovan set all this up, set up the OSS and then precursor to the CIA, what he wanted was PhDs who could shoot a gun, right? Someone who is educated, who we can also learn to be we can teach them to be a killer. They can learn that. The problem is they've stuck with that formula over the past 70 years, right? But what do we go? We were talking about the founding fathers, right? It's like education was different back then. A PhD back then, a classically Oxford, Harvard, whatever, education in Harvard in the 1940s and 50s is different than it is now,
100%.
So, but they've stuck by the formula. So they're still, recruiting from Harvard, Princeton, the Ivy League, and some of the more, like, quote unquote, prestigious state schools, like in Texas, like Texas A&M, for instance. They're going to go there and look for, your super smart students. And it's just, it's different now. It's different. They need to get away from that old Wild Bill Donovan way, because it's not the same as it was back then. Back then it worked. Back then it was good. Now it's not the same, man. It's not the same. So it's like, I don't know, but they're still all about it. They're still all about it.
No, you're spot on with that. 'Cause I talked to, when I was in Iraq, and I was talking to basically my counterpart, in northern Iraq, my counterpart that sits inside the agency apparatus there, and chatting with this guy, you know, we both come out of the CI field, but we're trained differently, we think differently, and we got into a conversation about you know not only host nation but some of the other third country folks that were there, and from a CI perspective. And I realized pretty quick when I started talking to him, he didn't know what he was talking about from a CI perspective, and I was just like, you're you're the agency guy. You're supposed to be the, like you said, you have a certain pedigree. You're supposed to be Ivy League educated. And come to find out, man, this guy was quote unquote educated, but he was educated all wrong. Some of the questions that, I was asking, he answered them. And I was thinking, I was like, you don't get it. And it wasn't because I was being, it wasn't because of my hubris, for sure. Right. Cause, I used to be, full disclosure, I used to be intimidated walking into rooms with those guys because I was like, man, this is the agency. Like, this is the top. This is the pinnacle, of this profession. And I used to be intimidated walking into rooms with those guys. And I was like, man, I have to be on my A game. Right. And I eventually got to the point to where it was like, I'm probably better trained than these guys are. And so, it's like, it's like that old adage, I used to walk in a room and, and wonder if people like me. It's like now I walk into a room and I wonder if I like them. And come to find out, just, I mean, some very basic, very, very basic scenarios. I'd be like, well, what about this? Maybe, maybe this situation is because of this. And, he was, it was a case of, he was very binary. He was like, no, it could never be that. I didn't even, and I didn't, it was a case of, and he told me, I didn't even consider that option because it can never, like, that just doesn't happen. That can't happen. Right. And it was like, yeah, actually it can. Right. Until we know all options are on the table. And I think any pragmatic thinker should, exactly, be like, hey, there's all sorts of, reasons why this could be the way it is. But he was very, no, and it was like, well, how do you know? Do you have information that, confirms that it's, 1, 2, or 3? Well, no. Well, then how do you know? And it was, well, I just know because yeah, it just can't be that. And I was like, nah, yeah, I don't think you're right on this.
Yeah.
So the education piece, when it comes to those guys now, yeah, you're absolutely correct because they're still trying to recruit from the Ivy League schools. They're not going to SMU, right? They're not going to, University of Central Florida, and recruiting out of there. And I think they're doing themselves a disservice by doing that. If I want problem solved, who I'm going to? I'm going to the middle class. I'm not going to the the upper class. I'm going to the middle class. I'm going to the lower class of society because they know how to fix things. They know how to solve problems. They know how to, hey, I need to put food on the table and I got to figure out a way to do it. All right. That's your problem solvers, right? Your fixers. I don't think it's I certainly don't think it's the other way around. I think that they're doing themselves a disservice.
What you need is unorthodox thinkers, right? And
Yep.
you need unorthodox thinkers where it's like, man, if I could solve this problem with no rules, how would I do it? And, lower middle class are probably the best at that. But yeah, going back to what we've been saying continuously, you get these quote unquote educated people. It's very difficult for them to think out of the box because they've been trained to think inside the box. So I don't think it used to be that way because what did I say earlier? There used to be a lot more emphasis on that critical thinking, that logical thinking, what's the thought process here? And I would say, highly educated people at Harvard don't think like that. They just don't. One thing I want to bring up, because we're coming up on 2.5 hours. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Roger's going to be so bad.
Oh, he's going to be big mad. So I heard a story around the Afghanistan withdrawal. And I don't know how it affected you guys, but the Afghanistan withdrawal affected me on a very deep level that I'll probably never really recover from for a lot of different reasons. And that's another podcast. But I heard a story from someone who was close to Trump when that happened. And the story at the time was I really kind of didn't believe it. I was like, whatever. But Trump was really worked up about, how that happened and everything. And Josh, you're going to know what I'm talking about here in a second. I'll kick it to you. He was really worked up, and he's like, if I would have been president, it would not have gone down this way because I told Mullah so-and-so that this was going to happen if he did that. I'm not president anymore. It happened. And now he's going to get away scot-free. And you know where I'm going with this because I'm about to kick it to you, right? Okay. So I was like, yeah, maybe that story is true, maybe not, because Trump's a lot of talk. Maybe this person is just saying this because that's what was supposed to be said at the time, or maybe Trump was just all bluster. But a video came out, and it was an interview. Who was it with? Wesley Hunt, and who was it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But Josh, you want to? Who was it? I can't remember. They came out and they said, yeah, this is what Trump did when they were negotiating the Doha Accords or whatever it was. Right? You remember?
Yep.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah. I can't remember who it was who was recounting that story, but I saw it on X. So, Trump's talking to Abdul Ghani Baradar, who was he was like the deputy prime minister of Afghanistan, right? He's the Taliban. And so Trump's, hey, it's going to be a phased withdrawal. This is kind of the timeline. This is how it's going to go down. And he turned around, and Trump, and I go back to our I go back to our episode that we had titled Trump American Gangster. It was during the summer of love. Trump told the Taliban at the time, when he's talking about, how the US is going to withdraw and everything. And, just as a side note, it was absolutely 100% time for us to leave. It was way beyond time for us to leave Afghanistan. But Trump turned around and told the Taliban, basically he said, if you harm one hair on a US soldier's head, I will kill every single one of you. I will hit this country harder than it has ever been hit. And when you think about, he dropped, a Moab as a show of force. And when you think about Afghanistan, there's not a whole lot to destroy in Afghanistan because it's already destroyed. But the Taliban's like, hey, yep, I understand. I understand. Blah blah. And Trump turned around and pulled out. He had it ready. He pulled out imagery of this dude's house and handed it to him. When he told him, if you harm one U.S. soldier, I will kill you all. He turned around and handed him imagery of this dude's house and be like, I know where you live. And that's what a president should be right there. That right there, right? Strong.
Yep.
That's what a president should be.
And
that is not what we have now.
And that when that story came out, and I think it was Wesley Hunt and another African American gentleman. I can't remember who it was, but when they told that story and I listened to it, I was like, "Holy crap, that story was true." That Trump freaked out when Abbey Gate went off because he was like, and then nothing was done about it. He freaked out because he had told them, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, and nothing happened to him. And it's just, yeah, man. Continuity of government, man. It's just like, man, like Trump or hate him, man, that was the right answer. It's like, man, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. And they did it. And just because we don't like Trump and his policy, we're not going to follow through on that. Dude, that's a complete wrong answer. It's wrong, man. That's not what's best for our country. And you know what? I mean, hey, good on Obama for going and killing bin Laden. Good on that, man. Hey, I'm not going to shit on you just because I don't like Obama. I think he's probably second or third worst president in history, probably the third in my book. But dude, I mean, let's get beyond all this and just like what's good for the country, man. You know, that's where I got to give it to Trump, man. Josh, you know, Roger's not here, so we can talk whatever. I don't think that Trump is like the ideal candidate. I'm no worshiper of Trump, you know, but I do think that he's outside of the influence of DC. I think that that's why they hate him so much. I don't think he's bad for the country. There are a lot of things I don't like about him, but I do think the Trump presidency was overall a good thing. There were some things I disagreed with. There are some things I disagree with Reagan on, but it's like I don't think that he's like the Antichrist, you know, unlike Obama. No, I'm just
No, to close out the Afghanistan piece, when we pulled out of Iraq in 2011, I had a lot of mixed emotions on that. Because at the time, so in 2003, when we went into Iraq, and I've said this before, and I think you said it before too. Like I was all about it. I was all about like we're going to go in and we're going to destroy Saddam Hussein and his regime, and we're going to make the world a better place. Right? 2011, Josh, and 2000, especially 2024, Josh would kick 2003 Josh's ass for being dumb. Uh, 2003 stars in my eyes, hold on yards. When 2011 finally came around, I was like, I don't know what we were doing. Like, I don't know why, because I still haven't reconciled it. I don't know why Afghanistan was different when we withdrew from Afghanistan and we watched it on TV. I would describe myself, and my wife even described myself, me as demoralized. Like demoralized. She was like, I've never seen you like that. And I mean, it was weeks of demoralization. It's the only way I can put it, because I don't know I don't know a better way to put it, but I was just completely 100% demoralized, because I just looked at it and was like, what was it all for? Like, what was it all for? And I just, the emotions that, run through me, and I'm like you, man, I don't know that I will ever get over that, because we both know, and there are a lot of our listeners know folks who died in Afghanistan, and for it to end like that, you know, you ever watch you ever watch the Ken Burns documentary on Vietnam, the series?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
I first watched it. I can't remember when I watched it. It's years and years ago that I first watched it, right? And so there's a guy on there. He lives in Oklahoma. He's a Marine, and he got into the protests, after he came back from Vietnam, and he threw his medals, he threw his ribbon rack, over the fence at the White House. And when I saw that the first time, I was just like, how could you do that? How could you do that? And after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, it was a light bulb moment for me. I don't know why that came to my mind. Like, I haven't seen that. I've watched that thing for years and years, and that popped in my head. It popped in my head, and I was like, I get it. I get it. I understand why you did that, because I went back and I looked at, I thought about, from Iraq and Afghanistan, all, all the ribbons and, stuff like that. And I looked at it and it's just like, what was it for? Like, none of these, except I'll give the exception, one, mean anything. Because it was just, I was demoralized, and I will never reconcile that. I don't think I ever will. And, and I agree with you. Hey, man, at the end of the day, Joe Biden voted no. be clear on that. Joe Biden voted no, but Obama, and that was, that was 2011. That was before re-election, and if that had gone bad, that could have jeopardized his re-election.
Mm-hmm.
But Obama had, he had the cojones to say, no, let's do this, because that was what, May 1st, 2011. He had the junk to say, no, it's Osama bin Laden. Like, this is the ultimate retribution and payback, and we went and did it. So, good on him for doing that. But that's what presidents have to be. It's like, when Reagan got inaugurated, Iran released the hostages because they knew, like, hey man, this dude, he may not do anything, but he may do something. Right. And we got it. We knew the last guy. We knew Carter wasn't going to do anything. We don't know about this Reagan. This guy's a wild card. And Trump showed that with Soleimani.
Mm-hmm.
That guy killed Soleimani. Something that no U.S. president has been willing to do, to target a member of the Iranian regime. Trump's like, no, we're gonna schwack this dude, and that's what a president should be, right? What's
There's
good for
something to
the
be
country,
said.
like you said.
Something to be said for a loose cannon. Sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, good Lord, it kind of upends the chessboard. You don't know what move they're going to make. Totally predictable with most presidents, but there's a funny meme. Check this out. Somebody posted on X. Why is it, quote unquote, why is it canceled, CANCELLED in the UK, but canceled with one L in America? And somebody posted, because we gave you that L in 1776.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh man, I wish I could think that quick. But yeah, I'm sorry,
it.
I had to throw that out there. But yeah, man, I'll tell you this. You and I, Josh, had talked about this. And I think Roger has too. A few years ago, we were probably about 4 or 5 years ago, before we even started the podcast, we were belly aching about where's our monument. Where's our monument? In DC. And then, Roger, of course, you start asking a question, Roger's gonna answer it for you. He's like, well, the conflict has to be over for 10 years before there's a monument, right? And the it's not even a good thing, but at least there was a starting point for that 10-year countdown to where we get our monument. And as we've said, I think we might have said on the podcast, it's like our monument will be that World War I monument that no one sees, no one knows where it is. And it's sad, dude. You seen the World War I monument off the reflecting pool?
Yep.
It's hidden. It's hidden.
Yeah, it's off of you got to go. Yeah, it's off of the reflecting pool. To the south of it, it's not even on the main path of the reflecting pool.
You've got to know where you're going to find it. And it's like, I think, you know what? I think it's only fitting that the GWAT monument be like that, because how many tens of thousands died in World War I? And again, for what? For what? That war was so poorly executed on our part. Probably shouldn't have been in it in the first place. Definitely shouldn't have been in it. It caused World War II, and maybe that's just a monument that, it's for the people who served and were in it. It's not for anybody else. We don't want to remember that. We don't want to remember how horrible that was and how stupid it was. So our monument, I won't blame them if it's kind of the same. But I will say this. When that thing opens, open invitation, and maybe we should make this a thing for C3 listeners, whether you served or not, you were alive when that happened and it meant something to you. I know everyone who listens to this, the GWAT meant something to you. 9/11 meant something. It's like, man, we all need to go and make it a thing. When they do the ribbon cutting on that, we all need to be there. I'm going to be there. I don't care what happens. If I'm alive, I'm going to be there, and that's going to mean a lot to me. But maybe it needs to be over on the side like the World War I monument is. You know, we never asked for that. We never asked. Well, a lot of us never asked for that adulation. You know, I'll leave the Navy SEALs out of that. We were just doing what we thought. We were just doing like, this is our time, man. This is our time. This is our greatest generation moment. We didn't want no ticker tape parade, and we didn't get one. We did get a lot of support early on. Early on, you know, people, you know, slipping you a 20 if they thought you were serving or whatever in the airport. But, you know, I don't know. It's just a lot of mixed emotions, you know. I wanted to win that war, Josh. I wanted to win that war. That's why I went. I went to win. And it just didn't happen.
It was it was certainly our generation's Vietnam. You know, we won the battles, but we lost the war, and a lot of the reason, you know, that we lost the war was because of politicians. They
And
wouldn't,
generals.
and yeah, absolutely, and generals. They wouldn't let us win. We had all the tools to win. We had what we needed to win, except for, you know, the generals and the politicians support. Um, you know, when I think, you know, when I think about I say the GWAT in general, right? So Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, and I wrote something, you know, kind of similar to this, almost on every, you know, anniversary of 9/11. You know, on my personal social media stuff was, you know, and somebody said it, and I can't take credit for this quote. You know, everybody was talking about, you know, the military's at war, America's at the mall. You know, early on, especially right after 9/11, you know, I mean, the country was, you want to talk about united? I'd never seen the country united like that. And even after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and you know, March '03, the country was still pretty united on that. You know, we're still riding that. You know, you're either with us or, you know, you're with the terrorist wave. Um, and everybody that I mean, you saw them everywhere. Everybody had that yellow magnet on the back of their car, that yellow ribbon magnet, you know, for, you know, for our troops, support the troops, or they had, so, you know, one of a soldier's name on it. But as the years drug on, that magnet kind of, it became a little faded, had some cracks in it, you know. Uh, you know, Joe couldn't buy early on. Joe couldn't buy a meal at the airport. You saw Joe, man, people just, you know, and people did it for me, you know, for me as well. Like, man, you see somebody at the airport in a uniform, bro, they didn't have to buy a beer or a meal because people were buying them. And then it got to the point where, dude, I'd walk through an airport, nobody acknowledged me. And I wasn't asking them to, and I didn't expect it, but it was noticeable, you know, because people just got tired. They got war weary. And, you know, and then you start questioning it. It's like, okay, well, the American public's not really paying attention and doesn't care. What is, you know, what are we really doing? And you saw rules of engagement change. You saw policies change. You know, you saw the attention of really the people back home. And then, you know, I even had people ask me, and again, anecdotal, but I even had people when I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm getting ready to, you know, head back over to, you know, to the box. And they were like, oh shit. Like, I legit had a friend from back home, you know, not military related, you know, never been in the, you know, military, never worked for the federal government or anything. They were like, oh shit, we're still there. And it was just, and that hit me. That hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, I was like, yeah, man, like there's people still dying. People still dying over there. You know, and that layered on with how we left Iraq and Afghanistan, how we went back, how we had to go back to Iraq to deal with ISIS, you know, in Iraq and northern Syria. You know, that was, you know, ISIS was created by the power vacuum that was left after, you know, we removed Saddam Hussein. Um, and when it comes to the monument, 10 years after the, you know, the GWAT is over, okay, So we still got another 8 years before, 6 years before, we get our monument. I completely agree with you. It should be off of the main drag in the mall. Um, you know, to where, because the majority of American people aren't going to go see it. They don't care about it, which is whatever. But for those of us who went in and out of the box, for those of us who know people, who paid the ultimate price, in those various locations, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, North Africa, it definitely will be a place. And I think, and I'm paraphrasing your quote, and I've used this time and time again. I've always attributed it back to you, uh, you know, but it should say, you know, we were giving ourselves we were giving ourselves to something bigger, and that something bigger no longer exists. Um, and I'll go ahead and dime you out. Luke's the one that wrote that.
No, that's not my original quote. I got that from somebody else. I can't, or somewhere else. That's not an
Uh,
original.
I've been giving you credit for it for
Well, I
years, for
appreciate
this
it.
whole time.
No, but it's so true, man. It's so true. And you mentioned something there, in the airport and everything, and something I've always had a problem with. And I think we've talked about it before, not on the podcast, but between us. A lot of folks that listen aren't veterans, and that's fine, But
Yep.
and but I believe that a lot of people who listen to us aren't veterans, feel the same way we do. And this is like, Luke, what the hell are you talking about? Here, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I've struggled for a long time, and I think Josh and Roger have too. When back in the day, when they knew you served or you pulled out that military ID or whatever it was, they would say thank you for your service, and they still do to this day. The vape shop I go to, they have a veterans discount, and they ask you for your ID, and you show that, and they say thank you for your service. To this day, always struggled with how to respond to that, because for me, the right response isn't "you're welcome," because the response for me was, it was a pleasure, right? It's a pleasure. So I came up with this. I'm like, how do I respond to "thank you for your service"? And we've said this on the podcast. It's like, I am just surprised that you guys trusted me to do that. It's me. I'm not a. So the response I came up with, well, it's an honor. That was my response. It's an honor.
I just put that in
But
the chat.
yeah, thank you. It was an honor. Yes, you just did. And but the other day, talking to my daughter, she's on her way home from work. She's on the West Coast, so she's quite ahead of us, and she's going to take her car in for a car wash. And I think she was in her uniform because she's just getting off duty. She's getting her car washed, and they're like, "Oh, you get a 10% discount for active duty. Thank you for your service." You know what she said? I think this one's good. She said, "Thank you. I appreciate your support." That's pretty good. It's like, thank you for supporting it. It's like, yeah, all right. It's an honor, and thank you for your support. Thanks for supporting that. I think I just never imagined. It's like my tattoos. I got a tattoo, and everybody wants to ask me, what does it mean? It never occurred to me when I was getting the tattoo that other people would be interested in that. Same thing, kind of similar with military service. It's like, it never occurred to me that people would thank me for doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the country, but I don't feel like I need thanks for it.
Right.
And they're not doing it. They're doing it because they're, in some cases, in most cases, they're saying it because it's what you're supposed to say. But in some cases, they really do mean it. So it's like, well, yeah, well, but you're not welcome. It's like I feel like that everyone, I should say, well, you would do the same thing. That's what I want to say. I would like to think that you would do the same thing, in different circumstances. Yeah. I don't know. It's a tough thing. I never felt like I need to be thanked for it.
It's always made me uncomfortable when people,
Mm-hmm.
throw out the, hey, thank you for your service. My immediate, my immediate physical reaction is I get uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Um,
same here. Same here.
and sometimes noticeably, and sometimes I'll stumble. Like it makes me, I turn into Joe Biden for a couple of seconds, and I stumble through my words because like you, it's like I and I did not join the military out of some call to higher service. I didn't look at it and say, I'm going to join the military because I want to serve my country. When I joined the military at the time, I joined because I was like, man, I am going nowhere quick and I've got to change, I've got to change my position. I got to better my
Nah,
position. And I come from a
I
military family.
I'm going to call you out on that though. I'm going to call you out, not saying you're wrong, but it's like you there were undertones. There had to be, Josh. There had to be undertones of no, I don't want to, cheapen it to Red Dawn, but at the same time, it's like, no, I believe in this. You know, there had to be undertones of that. It's like,
That's fair. That's fair. There was certainly I've always been dude, I've always been, mom flag, and apple pie. I absolutely believed in it, when I did it, but I didn't walk into the recruiter's office because it was like, you know, I'm gonna go carry the flag, over that hill. I went to the recruiter's office because I was like, man, I'm working for $7 an hour right now, and this ain't it, right? And
so, so, so you weren't Tom Cruise and Born on the 4th of July. Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, but it very quickly, obviously, I did not need to, I didn't need to learn how to buy into it, right? I was bought in from day one, especially coming from a military family. Um, but I never expected to get thanks for it. And so when people, you would be in uniform, go out to lunch somewhere, you pull out an ID card or somebody sees it and excuse me, they're like, oh, thank you for your service. I was always uncomfortable and I never knew how to respond to it. And I forget who it was, but somebody was like, we were chatting about it one day. I was like, yeah, man. I said, I, you know, somebody bought me lunch today. They didn't say who, but when we asked our waitress for the bill, they were like, it's already taken care of. Thank you for your service. And I was like, well, if they're still here, they want to remain anonymous. They're still here. Like, please tell them thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But I was like, but that's not to me, it wasn't enough. Thank you wasn't enough. And that's what, somebody was like, well, I always say, it was an honor. Um, because it was. At the end of the day, love it or hate it, however you feel about it, it was an honor to put on the nation's uniform, wear the nation's flag on your shoulder, you know, and I know Rogers mentioned it before. There's very few higher callings than to serve for religious, under a Christian, kind of a Christian cause. And I know that that may ruffle some feathers, out there, but at the end of the day, I truly looked, especially with the global war on terror, I looked at it as a crusade. And, Bush alluded to it at the very beginning, right after 9/11. He was like, this is a great crusade. And people, they tried to vilify him a little bit for it, but it truly was, and that's kind of how I looked at it. It's still, obviously don't get it as much now being a retiree, um, but you still get it every once in a while, you pull out a driver's license, something like that. They see a retired ID card. They're like, oh, well, thank you for your service. And, still my answer is, hey, thank you. It was an honor. Um, but I do like the thank you for your support. I had never thought about that. And I do like that because everybody serves in different ways. And there are a lot of folks who didn't join the military. There are a lot of folks who didn't serve in the military, and that's okay. You know, um, everybody serves in different ways. And, something as simple, I think I think just as highly, if not more, of the people who, bought me a meal in an airport as I was coming home and going back to, Iraq, on whatever, whatever trip it was. Um, that they served, they served in a sense as well by, making sure that I was just a little bit more comfortable. That I had a hot meal that I didn't have to pay money for. So I definitely don't big, for the folks who listen who didn't serve in the military, wear the uniform, don't think that veterans look down on you in any way, shape, or form, because we absolutely do not, at least not the three of us. And I'm
No.
perfectly comfortable speaking for Roger on that, even though he's not here, because I know he feels the same way.
Yeah. It truly is that support. That's why you're doing it, is for
Yep.
not just the folks who buy your meal in the airport. You're doing it for the people. You're also doing it for the people who, brought their screaming kid that's sitting next to you as well. But you bring up something interesting, and that truly could be a Sean Ryan. We could go on, but you brought up the crusade thing, right? And I'm a big believer in cycles. I'm a big believer in things we've seen in history. We talked about early in the podcast. We talked about the emperor's clothes and stuff. That's an old story. The emperor's new clothes. I'm a big believer in verbal tradition and cycles and things like that. So the Crusades were fought. No one can deny that. And you have to ask yourself, why were the Crusades fought? What led to that? And your new age university, history major who specializes in, the Middle East and European conquest will say, well, it's just because, the Catholic Church wanted to take over Jerusalem to, whatever, this and that. But at the end of the day, you look into history, it's like there was like a legit conflict of cultures back then, and something had to be done about it. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, well, yeah, the church did have a lot to do with that, the Catholic Church, but they saw the writing on the wall. It's like, we've got to do something to stem this tide. And we're going to get to that point again. And I don't think it's a conscious decision on anybody's part. I just think it's a cycle of nature. You see what's happening in Europe right now. We're going to get to a much darker place than when Bush tried to call it a crusade back then. We were seeing the beginnings of a much larger, more prolonged conflict between basically Islamic culture and Western culture. This is going to get worse, folks, and it's going to get worse long after you're dead. This is a generational conflict, and it's going to get bad. It's going to get like World War II bad. And I'm not talking about World War II like fighting. Like World War, it's going to get bad. So yeah, I believe that, Josh. I think you're on the right track there. It's like it's the beginning of a different type of crusade. But this is where I take your black-pilled approach. We're going to lose this time. And a lot of people would say we lost last time, but at least it held off the horde for a little while. This is a clash of cultures. Bottom line, just should have said, this is a clash of cultures. And it ain't getting better anytime soon. People are going to dig in their heels. And let me tell you something. The people who are opposite of you, who are listening to this right now, are much more dedicated than you are. I mean, that was the beginning. That was the beginning. Bush was onto something. He didn't know what he was onto, but he was onto something, historically speaking. If you're typing something out, you might as well just say it, because I'm done talking.
Well, no. So I was going to say, you talked about the, we start talking about the first Crusades, a lot of educators, and I use that, throw some air quotes up there. And we talked about the lack of higher education and the water down of it. A lot of people, especially now, they'll say, well, the Crusades, were a holy war to the Christians. The church could conquer more land, and stuff. Yet the first call for a crusade, it occurred in 846 CE. All right. And that's after an Arab expedition basically sailed up the Tiber and sacked St. Peter's in Rome. And after a string of losses by Christian factions and the loss of some Christian areas, then the church started pushing back. Church was like, what is going on? We can't have this. It was in response to Muslim aggression. And that's when the crusade started. It wasn't, the Catholic Church. And don't get me wrong, the Catholic Church they have their faults. All right, there is a lot to criticize about the Catholic Church, but the Crusades ain't one of them, because the Crusades every single one were in direct response to Muslim aggression, and a lot of people don't understand, like you said, the dedication that the average Muslim freedom fighter, if you want to call them that, has. They do not, you talk about those, those comforts, those creature comforts, that we enjoy. They don't have those, and they don't care about those. There is, I mean, you want to talk about dedication, Dan Crenshaw, you're not listening to this, obviously, but you want to talk about, hey, you want to talk about true believers, Dagestan, buddy, Dagestan. And Luke can attest to this as well. When you were in Iraq or Afghanistan, if you got into a tick, you knew automatically within just a couple of minutes whether it was your local homegrown Iraqi or Taliban guys, or if it was foreign fighters. Because the foreign fighters usually stayed. They stayed until that was over, and they usually died in place. And a lot of times, your foreign fighters, they were Chechens, they were Saudis, some of them, may have been Wahhabis, they were Tajiks, whatever the case may be. But they were dedicated. They were dedicated to a cause. They traveled to that area to get their jihad on. And, one of the quotes that, and I know Luke's heard this and Roger's heard this, one of the quotes I've heard, it sums them up perfectly. It sums your adversary up, right, from an ideological standpoint. And the quote is this: somewhere a true believer is training to kill you. He is training with minimum food or water in austere conditions day and night. The only thing clean on him is his weapon, and he made his web gear. He doesn't worry about what workout to do. His ruck weighs what it weighs. His runs ends when the enemy stops chasing him. The true believer doesn't care how hard it is. He only knows he wins or he dies. He doesn't go home at 1700. He is home. He knows only the cause. That is the level of resolve of your adversary. And again, when we talk about the West and we talk about Christian nations, that, like Luke said, that's coming, that's here now. And France is about to get a very, very real taste of their folly on immigration over the last 15, 20 years, with their election that just happened this week. And Roger was actually in France the day of the election. We tried to get him to get out and get some video, for C3 and, do some live reporting on the ground. But Roger was too busy, drinking beer and, trying on his French beret while he, ate, some French food at the drink French wine at the Eiffel Tower, walking around like Clark Griswold in European Vacation.
Buying white
Uh,
flags.
yeah, but so France threw Macron's party out on their ear and adopted a right wing, right wing party, anti-immigration, and this new, the leader of the party has said that basically she's going to throw all the Islamists out and the immigration policies are going to change and everything. And there's a number of Islamists now in France who are like, oh no, that's not going to happen. And they've been having some big rallies, and people need to keep an eye on that because that can turn ugly. It's going to turn ugly very quickly. It's going to turn ugly, and it's when you look at radical Islam in general, they they are true believers in their cause, and there is no wavering from that. Like Luke said, it's going to be very ugly, and yeah, man, I'm with you. I don't know that we win that next one. Um, based on our current ideology and our current immigration policy and what we've allowed. I think we've we invited the vampire into the house, and I don't know that we win.
No, I think it's gonna get. I think it's gonna get ugly, man. I think it's gonna get really ugly, and I don't know. I don't know what you mean by we. I do know
Western civilization.
Yeah, I think that if I don't want to go down this road, I really don't. There's a great book by Ralph Peters. It's called The War After Armageddon, and he kind of describes what we're talking about right now. When it gets to a point where it's gone too far, and that line has been crossed, Western civilizations traditionally, since they've sprung up, which has been relatively recently in the course of history, we're talking about the Persian Empire and all these things, are very efficient. And once Western societies are pushed too far, they tend to be very efficient in the way they do things. And if you can read between the lines on what I'm saying, is if it gets pushed to a point where it's gone too far, it's going to get ugly. And I don't think it's going to be in our lifetimes. I really don't. But it will get bad, and it'll get dark, and it'll be ugly, very ugly, ugly like Crusades ugly, but even worse. Could be wrong on that, but even civil. Well, I don't know. It's interesting. You could write a doctoral thesis on this, because Rome kind of went out with a whimper, but Western. It's like they said in The Sopranos. It's like there was a Jewish dude who was holding out on him, right? What early Sopranos episode? He was holding out on him. He wasn't going to give them what they wanted, and he's like, they're torturing him and all this stuff. And he goes, and he talks about the Masada. He's like, Romans, they laid siege to the Masada, all these years ago, and we held out. Where are the Romans now? And Tony Soprano goes, "You're looking at him, you idiot." It's like, look, times change. Times change. It's just, it may not look the way we think. All I'm saying, bottom line, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get ugly. It's just history. It's what's going to happen. We're not going to just give all this up. You can only be pushed so far. And that's what's happening in France right now. And everybody's just mystified as to why this is happening. Why is France turning to the right? This doesn't make any sense. It's like, man, as wussy as the French are, they've had enough. And but Josh, if you look through history, like the Franks, I mean, back in the day, they were no joke, man. Back in the day, France was no joke. Not the country itself, but the people who live there. They have some barbarian, not barbarian, but they have some ruthlessness in them. I mean, France was not easy to conquer way back in the day.
Yeah, no, I mean, you take a look back through, even when Caesar, went through Gaul, which I
Gual.
mean,
That's what I was searching for. I was
yeah,
searching for the Gual.
I mean, that's basically that's modern day France, and kind of Western Germany. Uh, when Caesar went through Gaul was, I mean, Gaul could not stand up to the legions, by and large, but they didn't roll over, for sure. And I mean, you take a look at what was it, Charlemagne, back then, dude, the French were no slouch, for sure. And we love to make fun of the French, and they deserve. There's a lot of there's a lot of there that they deserve to be made fun of
They
for.
did. They did not have a good 20th century.
They did. They did not have a good. They did not have a good 20th century, but and credit again. This is the episode. Hey, credit where credit is due. We would not be able to celebrate tomorrow without the French. So
100%.
The French. Hey, the French showed up, and the French helped us defeat the British. So we can celebrate tomorrow. The July 4th. So again, credit where credit is due. But yeah, man, they I don't know if I don't know if they peaked. Then or not, but yeah, Luke is correct. They did not have a good 20th century, man. It was they got stuffed in the wall locker time and time again in the 20th century. But that was not what they used to be, because again, man, they were not a slouch. Back in the day, for sure.
Well, how much longer you want to go, man?
Dude, I can keep talking about crusades and philosophical stuff. Oh, dude, I could talk about this for a while. Yeah,
I just wonder. Here's what you really got to worry about is when Germany starts waking up. Oof! Wow, that's going to be scary.
Yeah, and I think your assessment on I think Europeans in general, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've spent way more time there than I have. I think Europeans in general, you have to push them a lot, right? They are willing to take a lot, but when they're done, it's usually catastrophic. When they push back, it is generally like, and then that's when it is, we're talking mass graves, and we are talking carnage. And not only with the French, but especially with the German and the Poles. I mean, you give a German a rifle, they're going to start marching east, and it generally does not end well. It generally does not end well. Man, people, I mean, where did World War I and World War II start? It shit started in the Balkans. It's and so it's keep an eye on all that stuff, man, because they're absolute flashpoints.
And that's, geez, man. Yeah, this really could go 5 hours, because you look at like Russia, right? And you look through history. Are they truly? Well, I don't know. You look at the start of the Russian Empire, started in Ukraine. Not everybody knows that, but it started in Kiev. And like, if you look at the way Russians have handled things, I'd say they're more expansionist than the Chinese, but it's like, do they really want to take over the world? I think when you inject communism into that, of course, yes. But I still argue to this day, Russia is not a communist country. They're not. Maybe someday they could be again, but are they really trying to take over Europe, or do they feel like they're acting in their own self-defense because they're being threatened? Because if you look at history, they have been threatened. I mean, you look at the geography of their country, they're threatened, by China, they're threatened by Europe, all this stuff, and territorial integrity, cultural integrity, all these things. I think it's just historical. I just think they're lashing out. And I think that's how Putin views it. It's like, no, we're standing up. We're drawing the line. That's it. No more expansion. That's it. And like you said, you give a German a rifle, they start marching east. That's hilarious. But he in the Russian psyche, they feel that way. They feel constantly threatened by, people to their west. And it's just a natural lashing out. I'm not saying it's justified. It just is. It just is the way it is. So, Russia's had enough. We talked about NATO expansion and how they were promised back in the 90s that not 1 inch further, and that has absolutely not been adhered to. So it's like it's a lashing out. It's what it is. And we have to understand that. Did you see that Tucker Carlson's is right there in the final negotiations to interview Zelensky?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so Tucker posted that. And I also saw that people are saying that Zelensky's wife buying the Bugatti is a hoax. It's a fake receipt.
I did see that.
But it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
No, not at all. So one of the things about, Russia and, everything that I've read, and again, I am not an expert. I kind of couch myself as Dan Carlin a little bit on this. Like, I'm not a historian, but I'm a fan of history. I love history. I'm a history nerd, and I love reading books, and stuff on this. But Russia, this goes back to Napoleon. When Napoleon invaded Russia, Russia has had a historical fear of being surrounded. They have a historical fear of being surrounded and isolated, and they need a buffer zone. And that is, again, that goes back to Napoleon, and early 1800s, 1810, 1812, right around in there somewhere. And so when you look at NATO expansion, you look at why NATO was created in the first place was to counter the Warsaw Pact and contain Soviet influence. And then, you look at when did the Warsaw Pact dissolve? Well, it dissolved in 1991, basically when the Soviet Union dissolved, Warsaw Pact went away. And so you're like, okay, well, why did NATO need to keep expanding after that? The table was set for, the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014. That table was set in the mid 90s, right? The conditions were set when we continued to expand NATO. And in the early 2000s, 2001, 2003, and I forget exactly which one, when, we put the Baltics, we put the Baltics joined NATO. And I think it's, because correct me if I'm wrong, which one, I forget which one. I think it's Latvia that shares the border with Russia, not Lithuania. And so you have Latvia, who's on the border with Russia, Estonia, now members of NATO. And it's like, did we really need to be? Did they really need to be in NATO? Was that completely necessary? Because again, you're playing with that historical fear that Russians have always held of being isolated and being surrounded. And it goes to, I've heard this time and time again. It drives me nuts every single time I hear it. And guys like Hayden, who we all love to hate, Mike McFall is another one. Rob Person, is another one. And Rob Person, this is what drives me nuts. So him and Mike McFall are Pizzos, and Rob McPherson is a professor at West Point, right? So he's educating Army officers on this, and he's, he is, laying out this, Russia, here's, Russia causes all their problems. It's like, well, maybe some of our foreign policy is the problem too, because at the end of the day, and people are going to come on and be like, Josh hates cops and loves Putin. That's not it. There are certain things that we have done that have probably we have not helped ourselves on this piece, and people are but these guys constantly talk about, well, if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, next is Poland and then Europe. It's like, okay, Russia can't beat Ukraine. Ukraine is a third-rate military. Russia can't beat them. Russia damn sure can't beat Poland. Dude, Poland by themselves, dude, they would beat Russia like Tina Turner, man. Dude, they would dude, they would beat Russia like a Hebrew slave. So, to the whole we got to stop Russia and Ukraine so they don't take Europe is absolutely ridiculous on its face. And then you turned around and we talk about NATO, and everybody wants to put their, have their little Ukraine flags in their bio. Did you see the latest, the article? I think it came out today or yesterday. That's, obviously, Ukraine's been pushing for NATO membership. The U.S. is coming back and is going to tell Ukraine that the government is, quote, too corrupt to join NATO. After all this, after we goaded, dude, basically after we goaded Putin to invade Ukraine in 2014, with the Maidan Revolution, we're going to turn around and tell Ukraine, be like, yeah, man, you can't join NATO. You guys are too corrupt. You got to get some things in order before you can do that. Absolutely criminal.
There's a lot of bars you got to clear to get into NATO, and that's one of them. Is the corruption level and the levels of shadow bureaucracy and all these things. And Ukraine does not. And we've said this since day one. They don't clear those bars. I said I don't want to talk too much, but I said recently that I paid far more bribes in Europe, specifically Ukraine, to get out of, to pass through customs, to do all these things than I ever did in South America. Ever. And it's by far, it's in the hundreds of dollars. And I was not, I didn't have a lot of money back then, but I did have to pay bribes. I didn't know what they were. They called them taxes and things like that. But as I look back at the things I was paying to get through certain airports and things like that, it just, it always has been a corrupt country. It always will be. Oh geez. Yeah. So much yarn, so many threads to pull on this. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what the off ramp is in Ukraine. One thing I was going to ask you when we start talking, it's like right now it looks like Trump's going to win. It looks like Trump's going to win. If nothing changes, Trump's going to win in November. A lot of things may change, as we said in the first hour of this podcast, right? Almost 3.5 hours off. But
Roger's going to be so bad.
Oh, I just texted the group and I was like, Roger's going to have a stroke when he sees what we did tonight. And he's going to think, here's what Roger's going to think, that I was talking about some LGBTQ trans stuff, because we cut a full 20 minutes. When Josh wasn't here, Josh was out, gallivanting in the Pacific a few weeks ago. And Roger and I, we started out a podcast. We started talking about the trans stuff. Roger and Luke spoke his mind, and Roger's like, yeah, we're cutting the first 20 minutes out of that because we can't handle that smoke. And I was like, was it really that bad? And he's like, yeah. So when I sent that text, I'm like, Roger's going to have a stroke. I'm hoping Roger thinks we talk about all that stuff. He's like, you guys can't put that out. But anyway, what I was going to say was, let's say Trump wins the election. How do you think, Josh? How do you think that? Because I think Trump is seeking an off-ramp. I think he will be seeking an off-ramp. How do you think he handles that? Because it will be somewhat delicate, like politically. It'll be somewhat delicate because everybody thinks he's an agent of Putin and all this stuff. It's like, how do you think he does that? Do you think he comes in with a mallet, like a sledgehammer, or do you think he tries to scalpel this stuff? He needs to make me the ambassador to Ukraine. That's what he needs to do. He needs to make me the ambassador to Ukraine. I'll handle that shit.
I'd vote for that confirmation. So I think he comes in with a scalpel. At the end of the day, and this is regardless of who wins the election. At the end of the day, Ukraine is not going to be able to push Russia out of its current positions. I don't see it unless, and I'll caveat it with one instance, is if foreign militaries get involved, and I'm talking about foreign militaries put troops into Ukraine. That is the only way, and I think it gets, I think it gets exponentially worse if that occurs. But given the current conditions, I think that what will more than likely happen, whether Trump's elected or whoever's elected, I think that Russia will hold what they have, and they're going to keep what they have. I think it's going to end in negotiation. I think that Russia will keep Crimea, and I think they'll keep the Donbas. Basically, because you take a look at I think, and last I looked, and granted, it's probably been about 2 weeks since the last time I looked at kind of like where the lines were, so to speak, um, and they're kind of where they started in February of 2022, after, the initial push into annexing the Donbas and Crimea in 2014. Ukraine doesn't have the military to push Russia out of those positions. And I don't think, and, we talked about this, dude, the people of the Donbas and Crimea, I, they're fine with Russia being there. Because and you've actually been there, and interacted with it. Those people don't identify as Ukrainian to begin with, right? You go back and you look at the elections in 2000, what was it, 4, between Yushchenko and the other cat. Dude, those dudes all voted for Putin's guy to begin with, anyway. So they don't view themselves as Ukrainian, and they're fine with it. They're like, whatever. They are probably, folks who just want to live their life and, not be bothered by that the comedian turned president. Um, and Trump said during the debate with Biden that he was like, "I'll end that war in 20 minutes." And okay, obviously that's some bluster, but I think I think it's a negotiated peace, and I think it's a negotiated. Hey, let Russia have what they have, because that's what it is, and you know, we call it a day, because Ukraine is running out of men. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Dude, they're running out of military age males to fight this thing. Russia, they've got a lot.
So this is interesting. I saw something on X, and Josh, dude, we could definitely do long form. If Roger would get on board, we could do long form, because I truly believe we could go another hour and a half, because I'm about to bring up something right now that's very interesting. Because when we have time to talk, we have time to do a little bit of research, like look things up, right? So I saw something on X, and I was like, that's got to be fake. So I typed it into Google, and I'm like, okay, so this is The Hill, okay, reputable. Zelensky challenges Trump to release plan to end Ukraine war with Russia. This is right now. Like, this happened today, on the 3rd, day before the 4th, obviously. It's interesting that Zelensky is bringing that up. You could look at this a number of ways, right? It's like, Zelensky saw the debate. Everyone, Ukraine has an intelligence agency. They're looking at these things strategically. So it's like, even Zelensky is like, okay, well, now we got to take this seriously. What if Trump is president? So there could be a couple of ways of looking at this. Zelensky challenges Trump to release plan to end Ukraine war. If Trump knows how to finish the war, he should tell us today. Zelensky said, if there are risks to Ukrainian independence, if we lose statehood, we want to be ready for this. We want to know. So it could be looked at a couple of ways. Like, the conspiratorial way is, Biden's calling him up. It's like, hey, Zelensky, you go start making noise about Trump. It could be looked at in a different way. It's like Zelensky thinks, hey, Trump's going to be president. Let's hear what you have to say. So what if Trump came out and offered to Zelensky, reasonably, it's like, look, these people don't like you anyway. Why don't you just go ahead and cede that territory to Russia? They don't have Odessa yet. Odessa is in the south. It's got a port.
Nope.
Russia hasn't taken Odessa yet. You're fighting very hard to make sure they don't take it. Let's just go ahead and give Russia that territory. We will support you 100%. We're not talking NATO right now, but we'll give you security guarantees. partnership for peace, all that stuff. Do you think Zelensky would take that? Like to end the war? Because Josh, we talked about this. They're lowering the draft age now because y'all remember, if you faithful listeners of the podcast, we talked about Ukraine does their draft a little bit differently, where they don't start at 18, they start at 26. They've already lowered that to like 25. They're talking about lowering it to 24. The Ukrainian people are getting a little bit like, hey, what the hell are we fighting for? Because these people don't even want to be a part of our nation, as Josh just said. Do you think that that can be presented to Zelensky in a way where that's actually acceptable to cede what is modern historically been considered part of Ukraine when I talk about Crimea and the Donbass and things like that? Do you think Zelensky, if it's presented to him in the right way, might take that because of internal pressures of all their people being killed, all their young men? Because they've got a population crisis as it is. So it's like, what do you think? Like, why is this coming out right now? This article, like Zelensky's like reaching out to Trump, who is a candidate, not the president.
I mean, so it's hard to say why he's reaching out. You bring up both sides of it, but I think absolutely Zelensky would be open to, saying, okay, fine, going to and offering Putin, say, hey, look, we'll end this. You can keep the Donbass and Crimea, but that's we like this has to end. Because at the end of the day, Zelensky is fighting a war. The rest of Europe has Ukraine fatigue. The American people, by and large, have Ukraine fatigue, especially when they are, they're still paying a lot of money at the pump, paying a lot of money at the grocery store. And, they keep seeing, billions of dollars of packages, approved, to go to Ukraine when, inflation, year over year here is still at a, high and everything. Zelensky has at some point, Zelensky's going to have another election coming up. And, if he wants to, and I don't know what the Ukrainian constitution or what the Ukrainian law says about how many terms, a president can serve and whatnot. But, Zelensky's able to be reelected. He's going to want to be reelected. And so, having an unpopular war during an election year is not where he wants to be. I think he would be amenable to, hearing Trump out if Trump was willing to, to put that on the table. So, we'll see. But at the end of the, like you said, at the end of the day, Ukraine has a finite amount of men, and Europeans in general, from the ones I've talked to and reading and everything, they do not want to see, have a natural apprehension to seeing their very young men, we're talking 18 to 22, going into meat grinders. They just have that natural apprehension, based on historical events that should be obvious to everyone, of sending their 17, 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old men into the grinder, especially for there's really no return on investment there, by and large, especially if Russia's not threatening Kyiv or, Odessa. You still get to keep your port. You keep your capital city. You're still Ukraine. So.
Man, we'll see what happens. I've always thought it would be a good idea for a book or a story, like if a candidate is running for president, right, against an incumbent, start doing press conferences and all these things as if you are president, right? If something happens, do a press conference, and you can't use the presidential seal, obviously, but run that press conference as if you are president. I always thought that would be a good idea. Like that might be kind of a cool strategy to do all these things. It's like, hey, this is what it would be like if I was president. I mean, I don't know. It's a little bit outside the box, but I always thought that would be kind of cool. I would, if I was going to write a book like that, the title of the book would be called The Candidate, right? And they would run their campaign as if they were president. So every time something happened, like every time, you would just, do a press conference, you do a fireside chat. What president was it that did the fireside chats? Was that Roosevelt? Who was that?
Roosevelt.
It was
Yeah,
Roosevelt.
it was Roosevelt.
Crappy president.
No, I like that. I've never heard about that. Taking that approach, you just hold a press conference like you're the president and be like, all right, what you got? What you got here? Oh, well, I would do, X, Y, and Z. I would recommend, this, and this. I like that.
So worst presidents, Josh and I were talking about this earlier. It's like, I don't know. The more I read about Woodrow Wilson, the more I think he is the absolute worst president in the history of the United States. He was awful. He was horrible. Just he got us into World War I. The way he got us out got us into World War II. He was horrible. He was an academic who had no reason to be in that office. Zero. He was a professor who got fired from Bryn Mawr. It's like, okay, so first of all, you were a male professor at an all women's college. It's like, first of all, that's creepy. He's just horrible president. But Josh, I think you rate Obama as the worst in the modern era. And so you rate Carter as the second worst or the third?
The third worst.
And who's the second worst?
Biden.
Okay, so you rate Obama the worst. Why?
I rate Obama the worst because he came in and Obama, all the divisiveness that we're seeing now in the United States, between the left and right, I believe. I don't think Obama started it. I think that's obviously it's always been there, right? But I don't think it has been there on the level, that it was prior to him. And Obama also, I think Obama had a direct hand in orchestrating the Steele dossier, the Russia collusion narrative, which that by itself hastened. I think that hastened the divide that we're seeing now, and I think that's why one of the main reasons why Trump never, I think that's why we never got the full impact of what Trump could actually do during his presidency, because he was constantly fighting that narrative. And Obama knew about it. Obama supported it. He helped orchestrate it. And that divided a lot of people. I mean, there's people that I don't talk to anymore that I have known for 20 years that I don't talk to anymore because they were, Trump's a Russia agent, and I can't believe you're supporting a spy for Russia, and I'm never talking to you again. Right. I mean, that is the level of divisiveness that Obama put into this country, that the war on police, everything. In the modern era, there has not been a worse president than Barack Obama. I put Joe Biden second because Joe Biden knew, what he was doing. Joe Biden was in those meetings with Barack Obama, and the FBI director when all this went down, and Biden, Biden supported it all, and then just the policies that in Biden, and people can argue now, especially after the debate, that Biden doesn't know half the things that he signed or supported, in the last 3.5 years, but at the end of the day, there are times when Joe Biden has had to have some level of, lucidity and be like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm doing is not the best thing for the country right now, or I'm allowing people to do things that aren't the best thing for the country right now, but he continues to allow them to do it. So that's why Joe Biden gets my number 2 spot.
Well, I just messaged Josh and I was like, my wife is giving me dirty looks. I can see her. She's right up there. She's right over there. Look at the glass window. She's looking at me right now. She made some great enchiladas, man. Pre-July 4th enchiladas. Some nice, the rotisserie chicken. She got rotisserie chicken today. And she's like, what are we going to do with this? It's like, you're the chef, not me. She made some nice enchiladas. I'm getting beside the point. So I'm gonna tell a story, Josh. I'm gonna kick it to you to close it out, if you don't mind, or we can keep going, and you can ruin the relationship with me and my wife, whatever. Because I'm dedicated to this podcast. That's how. So you brought up something there, and I tend to agree with you with Obama. It's like he was so divisive. He had a real opportunity to bring everyone together. That's why I admire Ronald Reagan, because they say he's a great communicator, right? It's like, look, I know you don't agree with me, but I'm going to try to convince you. I'm going to try to convince you using reason, and just talk to me. Let's have a conversation. Let's communicate, right? Obama kind of missed that opportunity, and I think a lot of divisiveness. It started with George Bush. George W. Bush. There's a lot of divisiveness there, and it kind of bled over into the Obama administration. And I'm going somewhere with this story. I think there's a lot of space between people who fundamentally agree on things. A lot of friends that I grew up with, a lot of people that we consider neighbors. There's a lot of space between us that has been artificially created. And I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it as well. And where I'm going with this is I have a friend I've had since basically elementary school. His name's David. I'm not going to use his last name. It's not Dave, Darren. This guy's name is David. He and I grew up together. He joined the military. He enlisted. He went in as a Cab Scout. And, he decided he wanted to go officer because he had a college degree, and he went officer, and he was whatever Cab Scout officer is. He went from Cab Scout enlisted to Cab Scout officer. And I tried to hook up with him in Iraq. We were in Iraq at the same time. He was always out on patrol. He was going out during the day. I was going out during the night. We never got to hook up. Known this guy forever. My parents, his parents are really good friends. And a few years ago, when I was active on Facebook, we had a severe disagreement over, I don't even remember what it was about, and it's not important. But it was a severe disagreement, and we said things to each other on Facebook and on Twitter as well that were not called for, because this guy and I grew up together. We went to the same church. Our parents are friends. But at the same time, this rhetoric and these words drew us apart. It drove a wedge between our relationship. And I blocked him. He blocked me. F you. And I regret that, And for years, I'm like, I wonder what he's up to. But at the same time, I'm like, F him. F him, because I'm too headstrong, And recently he reached out to me, and it's not recently, it's within the past couple of days. It was last week. He reached out to me and he said, hey man, we've had our disagreements, whatever. He reached out to me. That's the point. And I messaged him back and I was like, hey man, I appreciate you being the bigger man for reaching out to me and, putting that olive branch out that I wasn't man enough to do. And now, we're friends again. And I think that this artificial wedge that's being driven between people who have more in common than they don't. Maybe we disagree on abortion. Maybe we disagree on this or Second Amendment and all this stuff. It doesn't mean that we can't be neighbors and we can't be friends. You got to talk to these people. We got to reason with each other in a civilized way. And I just, I hope he listens to this one. I'm going to tell him, hey, fast forward through the first 3 hours and 35 minutes and just listen to this part. Because, man, I appreciate you, David. I appreciate you doing that, because I wouldn't have. And I learned something from that. Maybe I need to back off of these things, be the bigger man, and realize what brings us together as like Americans and human beings. We talked about it, that dumbass who brings a screaming kid on the, sits right next to you, or the fat body who's taking up, 3 seat belts, and, their fat is flopping over you on the airplane. We're fighting for them too. It sucks, but it is what it is. And I want to tell that story because I think we all have more in common than not. And I think we can find common ground without having to dig in our heels and just, being against each other, because that's not what made this country great. What made this country great was us finding common ground without compromising our principles. So that's what I have to say. And I'm going to kick it to Josh to close us out for this epically long marathon C3. This is the longest one ever, Josh, man. Props, bro.
Well, we're going to end it on that. It's a good story. And I do hope David listens to this. So until next time, folks, as always, we appreciate your time. It's the most valuable thing any of us have, we certainly appreciate you taking time to listen to any episode. But if you made it all the way through this one, hit us up and let us know. We're going to get you some stickers or something for hanging with us on this marathon. So until then, keep your canteen cups tightly secured. Keep them full of good whiskey. Everybody have a great 4th. Get out there, celebrate our nation's independence. And, at the end of the day, try as hard as it may be. And it's a great lesson, for me to hear as well, or anybody, and get out there and, and try and love your neighbors, even though they may not love you. So have a good one, and we will catch you guys on the next episode.